My wife dragged me to the most important gala of the year just to tell me I wasn't good enough to be seen with her. "Stay in the back." "Zeke," she hissed, shoving a server's jacket into my chest. "Don't you dare embarrass me in front of the new owner." But when the billionaire arrived, she didn't even look at my wife. She walked right past the line of doctors and executives, marched straight to the back of the room where I was holding a tray of empty glasses, and fell to her knees in front of me. The room went dead silent as she whispered through tears, "I have been looking for you for 30 years. My wife dropped her glass of red wine, and the sound of it shattering on the marble floor was the only thing louder than the beating of my heart. Before I tell you how my wife's perfect night turned into her worst nightmare, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments if you have ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to love you the most. Your support helps me share these stories. My name is Isaiah Freeman, but everyone who knows the real me calls me Zeke. I am 74 years old, and for the last 40 years I have lived in the shadow of my wife, Vivian. To the world, Vivian Freeman is the prestigious director of St. Jude's Private Hospital, a pillar of the community, a woman of elegance and power. To me, she is the woman who has spent 4 decades trying to scrub the smell of cleaning fluid off my skin. We were in the parking lot of the Grand Meridian Hotel. It was a cold November night in Chicago, and the wind was cutting through my old wool coat. I had put on my best suit for this evening. It was a charcoal gray suit I bought 10 years ago for my retirement party from the maintenance department. I thought I looked decent. I thought just for tonight I could stand beside my wife as her husband. But Vivian had other plans. She opened the trunk of her Mercedes and pulled out a white jacket and a black bow tie. "The kind the catering staff wears. Put this on," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp like a scalpel. I looked at the jacket, then at her. "Vivian," I asked, my voice steady but heavy. "We are guests. Why do I need to wear this?" "You are not a guest, Isaiah," she snapped, checking her makeup in the side mirror. "I am the guest. You are here because I needed someone to drive the car since the regular driver is sick. And I cannot walk into that ballroom with you looking like that." She gestured at my suit with a wave of disgust. "Look at your hands, Isaiah. They are rough. They are calloused. You look like what you are. A retired janitor. Tonight is about the future of the hospital. The new owner, Elena Vance, is coming. She is a billionaire. She is buying the entire hospital network. If she sees me with you, she will think I lack ambition. She will think I settle for less." I took the white jacket. I didn't argue. I learned a long time ago that arguing with Vivian is like trying to hold back the tide with a spoon. I took off my suit jacket, folded it carefully, and placed it in the trunk. I put on the server's uniform. It was tight around the shoulders. "Just stay in the back," she instructed, locking the car. "Stand near the kitchen service doors. Don't speak to anyone. Don't eat anything. And for God's sake, if anyone asks you are just hired help, do not tell a soul you are my husband." She walked toward the entrance, her heels clicking on the pavement, her head held high. I followed 5 steps behind, just as she liked. Inside the ballroom was a sea of diamonds and designer tuxedos. The air smelled of expensive perfume and fresh lilies. I found my spot in the back corner, half hidden by a large fern. I held a tray of empty champagne flutes just to blend in. I watched my wife work the room. She was charming, laughing, touching arms, being the perfect executive. She was ashamed of me. After 40 years of marriage, after I worked double shifts, mopping floors so she could finish medical school, after I paid off her student loans with the money I saved from fixing leaky pipes, she was ashamed of me. Then I saw them, my son Marcus and his wife Chloe. Marcus is 35. He is a good boy, or at least he used to be, but he is weak. He lets the women in his life steer him like a boat without a rudder. Chloe is a different story. She is 30, blonde, beautiful, and cold as ice. She comes from money, or at least she acts like she does. They walked past the VIP section and headed toward the bar. Chloe spotted me first. A smirk spread across her face, sharp and cruel. She nudged Marcus and pointed at me. They walked over. I straightened my back. "I am still his father." "Well, look at this," Chloe said, her voice dripping with amusement. She didn't say hello. She didn't ask how I was. She just looked at my uniform. "You know, Zeke, this actually suits you. It's much more appropriate than that dusty old suit you usually wear." Marcus looked at the floor. "Hi, Dad," he mumbled. I looked at my son. "Marcus, you look well," I said. Chloe laughed, a short, dry sound. "Don't try to make conversation, Zeke. You're working, aren't you? By the way, Marcus and I were talking on the way here. We really need to turn your room into a home gym. It's getting ridiculous that you're taking up so much space in that house. I heard there are some very affordable state nursing homes in the next county. I gripped the tray tighter. My knuckles turned white. This was the house I bought, the house I paid for. Chloe, I said calmly, we can discuss this later. There is nothing to discuss, she replied, grabbing a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. Vivian agrees with me. You are becoming a burden. And honestly, having a janitor living in the house isn't exactly the image we want for our social circle. Just try not to drop anything tonight, okay? Don't embarrass us near the VIP table. She pulled Marcus away. He didn't look back. He just followed her like a puppy on a leash. I stood there swallowing the lump in my throat. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I knew who I was. I am Isaiah Freeman. I am a man of dignity. I don't need their validation. But God, it hurt. Suddenly the music stopped. The lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the double doors at the far end of the room. The chatter died down instantly. The master of ceremonies stepped up to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the new owner and chairwoman of Vance Healthcare Systems, Mrs. Elena Vance. The doors swung open. A woman walked in. She was in her 50s, striking, wearing a simple but elegant navy blue gown. She didn't wear a lot of jewelry. She didn't need to. She carried herself with an authority that money alone cannot buy. The room erupted in applause. Vivian was right at the front of the receiving line. She had positioned herself perfectly. She puffed out her chest, flashing her brightest, most practiced smile. She was ready to shake the hand that signed her paychecks. She was ready to secure her position. Elena Vance walked into the room. She was surrounded by assistants and bodyguards, but she waved them off. She walked slowly, scanning the faces in the crowd. She looked past the mayor. She looked past the chief of surgery. She reached Vivian. Vivian extended her hand, stepping forward. Mrs. Vance, welcome. I am Vivian Freeman, the director of... Elena didn't even blink. She didn't slow down. She looked right through my wife as if she were made of glass. She didn't shake her hand. She didn't acknowledge her existence. She just kept walking. Vivian froze, her hand still extended in the air, her smile faltering. A murmur of confusion rippled through the crowd. Why was the billionaire ignoring the director? Elena kept moving. Her eyes were searching the room, scanning the back corners, looking into the shadows. She walked past the bar. She walked past the tables where Marcus and Chloe were sitting. Chloe tried to wave, but Elena didn't see her. Elena's eyes locked on the corner where I was standing by the fern. She stopped. The entire room went silent. You could hear a pin drop. Hundreds of heads turned to see what the billionaire was looking at. They saw an old black man in a server's jacket holding a tray of empty glasses. Elena took a step forward. Her composure cracked. Her lip trembled. She took another step faster this time. Then she started to run. She ran across the ballroom floor in her evening gown, ignoring the gasps of the socialites. She ran straight to me. I stood frozen. I didn't know what was happening. I thought maybe I was in trouble. Maybe I was standing in the wrong spot. She stopped 2 feet in front of me. Her eyes were filled with tears. She looked at my face, studying every line, every wrinkle as if she were memorizing a map. Then the unthinkable happened. The billionaire, the woman who owned half the city, sank to her knees on the cold marble floor right in front of me. She didn't care about her dress. She didn't care about the cameras. She reached out and took my rough, calloused hands in hers. Uncle Zeke. She whispered, her voice shaking so hard it echoed in the silence. Is it really you? I looked down at her. I looked into those eyes, and suddenly the years melted away. I saw a young girl, a terrified medical student sitting on a bench outside the hospital boiler room 30 years ago, crying because she couldn't afford lunch. Elena, I asked, my voice barely a rasp. Little Ellie. She pressed her forehead against my hands and sobbed. I have been looking for you for 30 years, she cried. I found you. I finally found you. From the front of the room there was a loud crash. Vivian had dropped her glass of red wine. It shattered into 1,000 pieces, staining the pristine white floor like blood. Her face was pale, her mouth wide open in absolute horror. Beside her, Chloe looked like she was about to faint. Elena stood up, holding my hand tightly, and turned to face the room. She looked directly at Vivian, her eyes turning from tears to ice. This man, she announced, her voice ringing with power. This man is the only reason I am alive today, and tonight he is the guest of honor. She turned back to me, ignoring the shockwave that was destroying my wife's reputation in real time. Zeke. Take off that jacket, she said gently. You will never serve anyone ever again. I looked at Vivian. She was trembling. For the first time in 40 years, she looked small. I unbuttoned the white jacket and let it fall to the floor. I am ready, Ellie, I said. This was just the beginning. My wife thought she could hide me. My family thought they could discard me. But they were about to learn that you should be very careful who you step on because the ground might just shift beneath your feet. The room was spinning, or maybe it was just the shock waves radiating from the center of the ballroom where the most powerful woman in the city was kneeling at the feet of a man in a waiter's jacket. I looked down at Elena Vance, but I didn't see a billionaire. I saw a skinny, shivering girl in a worn-out coat sitting on a crate next to the hospital boiler room trying to memorize anatomy terms while her stomach rumbled loud enough to hear over the furnace. Please get up, Ellie, I said, my voice cracking as I reached out to help her. You are going to ruin your dress on this dirty floor. She laughed a wet, tearful sound and gripped my hand like a lifeline to pull herself up. I don't care about the dress, Zeke. I don't care about any of this. I thought you were dead. I went back to find you after I graduated, but they told me you had moved on. They said there was no record of you. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I knew exactly who they were. Vivian handled all the personnel files. She had erased me from the hospital's history the moment she got promoted to administration. Before I could answer, a shadow fell over us. It was Vivian. She had recovered from her shock, or at least she had plastered her mask back on. She stepped between us, physically pushing me back with her shoulder, her perfume cloying and suffocating. Mrs. Vance, please, you must be mistaken, Vivian said, her voice dripping with a sickly sweet condescension that made my skin crawl. She flashed a nervous smile at the crowd trying to control the narrative. This is just Isaiah. He used to be part of the cleaning staff years ago. He is a bit confused in his old age. Sometimes he thinks he knows people he has merely seen in magazines. She turned to me, her eyes flashing with a silent threat. Isaiah stepped back. You are making a scene. Go back to the kitchen. I lowered my head, the old habit of obedience kicking in. I started to turn away to retreat into the shadows where she had kept me for 40 years. No. The word wasn't shouted, but it carried enough weight to stop the earth from spinning. Elena reached past Vivian and grabbed my arm. Her grip was iron. She is not mistaken, Vivian, Elena said. Her voice had changed. The warmth was gone, replaced by the cold, hard steel of a woman who negotiates billion-dollar mergers. She looked at my wife with an expression that would have withered a lesser person. He is not just part of the cleaning staff, and he is certainly not confused. This man is the only reason I didn't jump off the hospital roof in 1994. A gasp rippled through the onlookers. Vivian's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. You must be joking. Vivian stammered, her face flushing a deep, ugly red. Isaiah. But he didn't even finish high school. He is a better human being than anyone in this room. Elena interrupted, her voice raising just enough to reach the back corners of the hall. When I was a student starving and failing because I couldn't afford textbooks, this man gave me half his sandwich every single day for a year. When I couldn't pay my tuition, he gave me $5,000. It was his life savings. He told me the world needed good doctors more than he needed a new truck. I looked at my shoes. I hadn't thought about that money in decades. It was the money I had saved to buy a small fishing boat. I never bought the boat. Vivian turned to me, her eyes wide with a mixture of horror and fury. You gave her $5,000. We were broke. You told me you lost that money in a bad investment. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Elena stepped closer to Vivian, invading her personal space. You were the nursing supervisor back then, weren't you, Vivian? I remember you. I remember you writing me up for being late when I had to walk 3 miles in the snow because I couldn't afford the bus. I remember you telling me I wasn't cut out for medicine because my shoes were scuffed. Vivian paled. That was a long time ago. I was just trying to instill discipline. Elena ignored her. She turned to the master of ceremonies, who was hovering nervously nearby with a microphone. Change the seating arrangements, Elena commanded. Mr. Freeman sits at the head table, at my right hand. The MC nodded frantically. Of course, Mrs. Vance. And Mrs. Freeman. Elena looked at Vivian as if she were a stain on the carpet. Mrs. Freeman can sit at table 45. I believe there is an open seat near the service entrance. It should be convenient for the restrooms. Table 45 was the exile table. It was where they put the interns and the distant relatives nobody wanted to talk to. It was in the back behind a pillar right next to the swinging doors of the kitchen. "But I am the director," Vivian whispered, her voice trembling with rage. "I am the host." "Not anymore," Elena said calmly. "Tonight you are a guest, and you are on thin ice." Elena hooked her arm through mine. "Come on, Zeke. I want you to meet my husband. I want to hear everything." She led me away, leaving my wife standing alone in the middle of the dance floor, humiliated in front of the entire city elite. As we walked toward the VIP table, I felt hundreds of eyes on me. But for the first time, I didn't feel small. I felt seen. Dinner was a blur. I sat between Elena and the mayor. I was still wearing the white server's shirt because I had left my suit jacket in the car, but nobody cared. Elena told stories about me to the table. She told them about how I used to fix the heaters in the student dorms for free so the kids wouldn't freeze. She told them about the wisdom I shared while mopping the hallways. I saw Marcus and Chloe watching from their table. Chloe looked like she had swallowed a lemon. Marcus just looked confused, like he was trying to solve a puzzle he didn't have the pieces for. Far in the back, I could see the top of Vivian's head bobbing behind a large floral centerpiece. She wasn't eating. She was staring at me. And even from 50 feet away, I could feel the heat of her anger. The night ended too soon. Elena hugged me goodbye at the valet stand. "This isn't over, Zeke," she promised, pressing a business card into my hand. "We have a lot to discuss. I'm going to make this right." I watched her limousine pull away, feeling a warmth in my chest I hadn't felt in years. Then the black Mercedes pulled up. The window rolled down. Vivian was behind the wheel. She had sent the driver home so she could drive. "Get in," she hissed. I opened the door and sat in the passenger seat. The leather was cold. The moment the door clicked shut, the atmosphere changed. The warmth of the gala vanished, replaced by a suffocating tension. Vivian didn't start the car immediately. She gripped the steering wheel so hard her knuckles turned white. Her breathing was ragged heavy. "Vivian," I started to say. Crack. Her hand moved so fast I didn't see it coming. She slapped me across the face. It was harder than the slap Chloe had given Aurora in that other story. This was a slap born of 40 years of resentment. My head snapped to the side. My cheek stung hot and throbbing. "You fool!" she screamed, her voice filling the small space of the car. "You absolute incompetent fool!" I touched my face, staring at her in shock. She had belittled me. She had ignored me. She had controlled me. But she had never hit me. "What did you tell her?" she shrieked, spit flying from her mouth. "What kind of sob story did you feed her?" $5,000. You gave away $5,000 to a stranger when we were trying to buy a house. "It was my money, Vivian," I said quietly. "I worked overtime for it. It was our money." She yelled, pounding the steering wheel. "Everything you make is mine. I am the one who built this life. I am the one who clawed my way to the top. And you tried to destroy it all in one night." She started the car and peeled out of the parking lot, driving recklessly fast. The city lights blurred past us. "Do you have any idea what you have done?" she continued, her voice dropping to a terrifyingly low growl. "You embarrassed me. You made me look like a monster in front of the new owner." She put me at table 45. "Isaiah, table 45. I was sitting next to the ice machine. "It wasn't my fault, Vivian," I said, looking out the window. She recognized me. "I can't help that I was kind to her." "Kindness," she scoffed. "That wasn't kindness. That was stupidity. And now she thinks you are some kind of saint and I am the wicked witch. Well, I am not going to let you ruin my career. I have worked too hard to let a janitor bring me down." She swerved around a corner, tires screeching. "Here is what is going to happen," she said. "Tomorrow morning we are going to her office. You are going to tell her that you were confused. You are going to tell her that you mixed her up with someone else. You are going to tell her that your memory is failing." I looked at her. "You want me to lie. You want me to tell her I am senile." "Yes," she screamed. "I want you to tell her whatever it takes to fix this. You will tell her that I am a wonderful wife who takes care of her sick, confused husband. You will refuse any gifts, any money, any offers she makes. You will tell her you just want to be left alone in your retirement. And if I don't," I asked. Vivian slammed on the brakes at a red light. She turned to me, her eyes dark and empty. "If you don't, Isaiah," she whispered, "I will divorce you. I will take the house. I will take the pension. I will make sure you end up in a state-run facility where the nurses don't change the sheets. You think you are a hero tonight? Without me, you are nothing. You are a homeless old man with rough hands. I looked at the woman I had married. I looked for a trace of the girl I had fallen in love with, but she was gone. Maybe she had never existed. Maybe I had just projected my own hope onto her ambition. We pulled into the driveway of our large, cold house, the house that Marcus and Chloe wanted me out of. "Get out," she said, "and don't think about sleeping in the bedroom. You are sleeping in the basement tonight. I can't stand the sight of you." I got out of the car. The night air was biting. I watched her storm into the house I had paid for with 40 years of sweat. I touched the business card in my pocket, Elena's card. Vivian thought she had won. She thought her threat had silenced me. She thought I was still the same man who had taken her orders for 4 decades. But as I walked toward the side door that led to the basement, I realized something. The slap hadn't broken me. It had woken me up. I wasn't going to her office tomorrow to apologize. I was going to her office to tell the truth. All of it. Vivian wanted a war. She was about to find out that the janitor knew where all the bodies were buried, and for the first time in my life I wasn't cleaning up the mess. I was about to make one. I woke up to the sound of furious pounding on the front door. It was barely 7 in the morning. My back was stiff from sleeping on the old cot in the basement where Vivian had banished me the night before. The air down there smelled of mildew and old cardboard, a sharp contrast to the lavender-scented sheets of the master bedroom I had paid for but was no longer allowed to enter. I rubbed my eyes, trying to shake off the lingering sting of my wife's slap, and slowly climbed the stairs. Before I even reached the kitchen, I heard Chloe's voice. It was shrill, piercing, and dripping with panic. "You have to fix this, Mother," she was screaming. "Do you have any idea what this looks like? The owner of the entire hospital network ignored you to talk to him. If she finds out you treat him like garbage, she will fire you. You will lose the directorship. You will lose the pension. And Marcus and I cannot afford to cover your lifestyle if you get kicked to the curb." I opened the door to the kitchen. The scene before me looked like a war room. Vivian was sitting at the head of the table, still wearing her silk robe, her face a mask of cold, calculated rage. Marcus was leaning against the counter, staring at his coffee cup as if the answers to his life were hidden in the black liquid. Chloe was pacing back and forth, her heels clicking aggressively on the tile floor. When I entered, the room went silent. 3 pairs of eyes turned to me. There was no warmth, no morning greeting, just hostility. "Well, look who finally decided to wake up," Chloe sneered, stopping her pacing to cross her arms over her chest. "The man of the hour. The man who decided to destroy this family's reputation in 5 minutes flat." I didn't look at her. I looked at my son. "Good morning, Marcus," I said. Marcus shifted his weight uncomfortably. He glanced at Vivian, then back at his coffee. "Morning, Dad," he mumbled, his voice barely audible. Vivian cleared her throat. It was a sharp, authoritative sound that demanded immediate attention. "Sit down, Isaiah," she commanded, pointing to the wooden chair at the far end of the table. I sat. The wood was cold against my legs. I felt like a prisoner facing a parole board that had already decided to deny his release. "We have a problem," Vivian began, her voice steady and terrifyingly calm. "Because of your little stunt last night, my position at the hospital is vulnerable. Elena Vance is an emotional woman. She has latched onto some nostalgic memory of you, and she thinks you are some kind of hero. If she discovers the reality of our marriage, if she finds out that I am the one who runs this family and you are simply dead weight, she might react irrationally. She might try to punish me." She pushed a stack of papers across the table toward me. They slid across the polished wood and stopped right in front of my hands. "What is this?" I asked, looking down at the typed documents. "It is a solution," Chloe interjected, stepping up to the table. "It is damage control, Zeke. Since you made the mess, you are going to clean it up." I picked up the top page. My hands were trembling slightly, not from age, but from a rising sense of dread. I began to read. It was a legal document drafted in standard boilerplate language, but the content was monstrous. It was a formal admission of cognitive decline. By signing this, I would be admitting that I was suffering from early-onset dementia. I would be admitting that my memory was unreliable, that I often confused strangers for old acquaintances, and that my interaction with Elena Vance was a result of confusion and disorientation. But that wasn't all. The second page was a power of attorney. It granted Vivian full, unrestricted control over all my finances, my pension, my social security, and any assets in my name. It stated that this was necessary to compensate the family for the reputational damage caused by my erratic behavior. I looked up from the papers. The kitchen felt airless. "You want me to say I am crazy?" I asked, my voice low. "You want me to tell the world I am senile? It is not about what you are, Isaiah," Vivian said, leaning forward, her eyes hard as flint. "It is about protecting this family. If you admit you are confused, then Elena will understand why I keep you in the background. She will understand why I treat you firmly. She will see me not as a cruel wife, but as a long-suffering caretaker dealing with a difficult, mentally declining husband. It makes me the hero again." "And the money?" I asked, tapping the second page. "Why do you need my pension? You make 20 times what I make." "Compensation," Chloe snapped. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing it was last night? My friends were texting me asking why my father-in-law was serving drinks." "We need to secure our future in case your little friend Elena decides to fire Vivian. We need a safety net. And since you are the cause of the risk, you should provide the insurance." I looked at Marcus. He was still staring at his coffee, but I could see his knuckles were white around the mug. "Marcus," I said, "do you agree with this? You want your father to sign away his mind? You want me to lie and say I don't know who I am?" Marcus finally looked up. His eyes were wet, but there was no strength in them, just fear. "Dad, please," he said, his voice cracking. "Mom worked so hard for that job. If she loses it, we all lose. Just sign the papers. It's just a formality. Nothing has to change. You can still live here. We will take care of you." "Take care of me," I repeated. "Like you took care of me last night, by telling me to stay in the back, by laughing when your wife called me a burden." Marcus flinched and looked away. Vivian slammed her hand on the table. "Enough of the melodrama, Isaiah. Pick up the pen. Sign the papers. We are going to Elena's office in an hour, and you are going to hand this to her personally. You are going to apologize for your confusion, and we are going to put this nightmare behind us." She held out a heavy, expensive fountain pen. The gold nib glinted in the morning light. I looked at the pen. I looked at the contract that would turn me into a legal child, a slave in my own home. I thought about the 40 years I had spent supporting Vivian. I thought about the double shifts. I thought about the weekends I spent fixing the roof because we couldn't afford a contractor. I thought about Elena Vance kneeling on the floor, looking at me with more respect in 5 minutes than my family had shown me in a lifetime. For 40 years I had said yes. Yes, Vivian. Whatever you want, Vivian. I'm sorry, Vivian. I took a deep breath. The air in the kitchen tasted bitter, like stale coffee and betrayal. "No," I said. The word hung in the air. It was soft, but it was solid. Vivian blinked. "Excuse me, I said no," I repeated louder this time. I pushed the papers back across the table. "I am not senile. I am not confused. I knew exactly who Elena was. And I am not giving you my money." Chloe let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "Oh my God, he really thinks he is someone now. One billionaire says hello to him and suddenly he has a backbone." Vivian stood up slowly. She was shaking with rage, her face contorted into a mask of pure hatred. "You are going to sign those papers, Isaiah," she whispered, her voice like a snake sliding through dry grass. "Or you will wish you were dead." I stood up too. My knees popped, but I stood tall. "I am not signing anything, Vivian. Not today. Not ever." For a second I thought she was going to hit me again. Her hand twitched, but then she did something worse. She turned and walked out of the kitchen. "Marcus, Chloe, come with me," she ordered. They followed her without hesitation. I stood alone in the kitchen listening. I heard them go upstairs. I heard the sound of drawers being ripped open. I heard the closet door slam. A few minutes later, Vivian came back down. She was carrying an armful of my clothes, my shirts, my trousers, my underwear. She walked past me to the back door, opened it, and threw everything out onto the wet patio stones. Chloe and Marcus followed, carrying my books. My old radio, the picture frame of my mother I kept on the nightstand. They dumped it all in a pile in the mud. "If you are not going to sign," Vivian screamed, turning back to face me, "then you are not sleeping in this house. You want to act like a stranger? Fine, you are a stranger." She pointed a manicured finger at the basement door. "Get down there," she shrieked. "That is where you belong, with the rats and the mold. The master bedroom is mine. The guest rooms are for people I respect. You are nothing but an ungrateful parasite. Dad, just sign it." Marcus pleaded from the doorway, holding a box of my shoes. "Please don't make her do this." I looked at my son, holding my shoes like he was taking out the trash. "Put them down, Marcus," I said. He dropped the box on the patio. Vivian stepped close to me. Her eyes were wild. "You have until tonight," she hissed. "You sit in that basement and you think about what your life looks like without me. You think about who is going to feed you. You think about where you are going to go. Because if those papers aren't signed by dinner time, I am changing the locks and I will call the police and tell them a crazy old man is trespassing on my property." She grabbed my arm and shoved me toward the basement door. "Get out of my sight." I stumbled but caught myself on the door frame. I didn't look back at them. I couldn't bear to see the triumph in Chloe's eyes or the cowardice in Marcus's. I walked through the door and down the wooden steps into the dark. Vivian slammed the door behind me. I heard the lock click. Then I heard the heavy thud of a chair being wedged under the doorknob. I was trapped. I was in the dark. I was surrounded by the cold, damp air of the underground. I sat down on the edge of the old cot. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. Not anymore. Vivian thought she had broken me. She thought that by throwing my clothes in the mud and locking me in the dark, she would force me into submission. She thought the darkness would make me weak. But she forgot something. I worked in the maintenance tunnels for 30 years. I know how to navigate the dark. I know that when the lights go out, your eyes adjust. You start to see things you couldn't see before. I sat there in the silence, and for the first time in 40 years, I didn't feel like a husband or a father or a janitor. I felt like a man who had nothing left to lose, and a man with nothing to lose is the most dangerous man in the world. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small white card Elena had given me. I couldn't see the numbers in the dark, but I ran my thumb over the embossed letters. Vivian wanted a war. She had fired the first shot. She had taken my bed, my clothes, and my dignity, but she hadn't taken my voice, and she was about to find out exactly how loud I could be. The basement was colder than I remembered. The dampness seeped into my bones, making my joints ache with a dull, throbbing rhythm that matched the pounding of my heart. I had spent the night sitting on a rusted folding chair wrapped in a moth-eaten blanket I found in a storage bin. Upstairs, I could hear the muffled sounds of the life I had paid for but was no longer allowed to live. I heard the coffee grinder. I heard the television. I heard my wife and son living as if I had simply ceased to exist. My old flip phone buzzed in my pocket. It was the only thing they hadn't taken, probably because they thought it was worthless. The screen was cracked, but I could see an unknown number flashing. "Hello," I answered, my voice raspy from disuse. "Mr. Freeman," a crisp, professional voice said. "This is Arthur, personal assistant to Mrs. Elena Vance. Mrs. Vance requests the pleasure of your company for lunch. A car is waiting outside your residence." I stood up, my knees popping. "Now, immediately, sir." I walked to the basement door. The chair was still wedged under the knob from the outside. I knocked tentatively at first, then harder. "Open the door," I shouted. "I need to leave." I heard footsteps. The chair scraped across the floor. The door swung open, revealing Vivian. She was dressed in her power suit, a sharp navy blazer, and a pearl necklace. She looked at me with a mixture of disgust and triumph. "Changed your mind, Isaiah?" she sneered. "Ready to sign the papers? I knew a night with the rats would bring you to your senses." I didn't answer her. I pushed past her and walked toward the front door. "Where do you think you are going?" she demanded, following me. "You are not leaving this house until you sign that power of attorney." I opened the front door and stepped onto the porch. Parked in our driveway, blocking Marcus's leased Porsche, was a silver Rolls-Royce Phantom. It was a machine of pure elegance gleaming in the morning sun. A chauffeur in a black uniform stood by the rear passenger door. Vivian stopped dead in her tracks. Her eyes widened. Her expression shifted instantly from anger to greedy anticipation. "Oh," she breathed, smoothing her hair. "She sent a car. Of course she did. She wants to apologize. She wants to smooth things over before I sue her for emotional distress." She pushed past me, descending the porch steps with a bright fake smile plastered on her face. "Good morning," she said to the chauffeur, extending her hand as if she were royalty. I am Vivian Freeman. Please take us to Mrs. Vance immediately. We have much to discuss. She reached for the door handle. The chauffeur stepped in front of her. He didn't touch her, but his presence was a wall she couldn't pass. He was a large man, impassive and imposing. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, his voice deep and unyielding. Vivian blinked, her smile faltering. "Excuse me, I am the director of St. Jude's. Mrs. Vance is expecting us." "Mrs. Vance sent this car for Mr. Isaiah Freeman," the chauffeur stated calmly. "Only Mr. Freeman." Vivian froze. She looked at the car, then back at me, standing on the porch in my wrinkled shirt and trousers that still bore mud stains from where she had thrown them the night before. "Him," she spat, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You are taking him. He is the janitor. I am the wife. I am the one she needs to talk to." The chauffeur ignored her completely. He looked up at me and nodded respectfully. "Mr. Freeman, whenever you are ready, sir." I walked down the stairs. I passed my wife. She was shaking with rage, her face a mask of disbelief. "You can't go without me," she hissed, grabbing my sleeve. "You will ruin everything. If you get in that car, Isaiah, don't bother coming back." I gently removed her hand from my arm. "You already kicked me out, Vivian," I said quietly. "Remember, I got into the car." The leather seats were soft as butter. The air was cool. The chauffeur closed the door, sealing me in a cocoon of silence. As we pulled away, I watched through the tinted window. Vivian was standing in the driveway, screaming at the empty air, looking smaller and smaller, until she disappeared from view. The ride to the Vance Corporation headquarters was silent and smooth. We arrived at a glass skyscraper that pierced the clouds. I was ushered through a private entrance, up a dedicated elevator, and directly into the penthouse office. Elena was waiting for me. She wasn't sitting behind her massive desk. She was standing by the window, looking out over the city. When I entered, she turned and smiled. It was the same smile from 30 years ago, genuine, warm, and tinged with a sadness that money couldn't erase. "Zeke," she said, walking over to hug me. "Thank you for coming." I hoped the car was comfortable. It was better than the basement, I admitted. She pulled back, her eyes darkening. The basement, I waved it off. I didn't want to start with complaints. I wanted to understand. "Elena," I said, sitting on the plush sofa she offered. "Last night, you said I saved you. I remember giving you the money, but surely that wasn't the only reason." She sat opposite me and sighed. She looked down at her hands, devoid of the flashy rings Vivian loved so much. "It wasn't just the money, Zeke," she said softly. "Do you remember 1994? Do you remember the winter?" "I was an intern?" I nodded. It was a brutal winter. The heating system in the old wing kept breaking down. Vivian was the head nurse of the trauma unit. Then Elena continued. "She was cruel. She didn't just demand excellence. She demanded submission. She targeted the students she thought were weak. And because I was poor, because my shoes had holes in them, she decided I didn't belong." She looked up at me, her eyes glistening. She used to schedule me for triple shifts without breaks. She would throw my charts in the trash and claim I lost them. She humiliated me in front of the attending physicians every single day. One night she found me sleeping in the on-call room during a break. She dragged me out by my arm and told me I was a worthless waste of space. She told me I should do the world a favor and jump off the roof. I felt a cold stone settle in my stomach. I knew Vivian was tough. I didn't know she was a monster. "I went to the roof that night," Zeke, Elena whispered. "I was tired. I was hungry. I had no money for tuition, and the woman in charge of my career told me I should die. I was standing on the ledge. I was ready. And then you came up to fix the ventilation fan. I remembered that night. I remembered seeing a girl in scrubs standing too close to the edge, shivering in the freezing wind." "You didn't yell," Elena said, a tear escaping down her cheek. "You didn't call security. You just walked over, took off your heavy coat, and wrapped it around my shoulders. You handed me a thermos of hot soup. And you said, 'Little one, the view is better from the ground.'" I stared at her. I had forgotten the words, but the feeling came rushing back. The desperate need to keep a child safe. "You sat with me for 3 hours, she said. "You told me that mean people are just loud, but good people are strong. You told me that I had a gift. And the next day you found me in the hallway and handed me an envelope. $5,000, I murmured. "It was everything you had," she said. "You told me it was for a boat. But you gave it to me. You said, 'Invest in yourself, Ellie. The boat can wait.'" She stood up and walked to her desk. She picked up a thin, rectangular piece of paper and walked back to me. I invested at Zeke. I finished school. I built a company. I bought the hospital network that tried to break me. And now, she handed me the paper. It was a check. I looked at the numbers. I blinked, thinking my eyes were playing tricks on me. 5 followed by 7 zeros. $50 million. This isn't charity, she said firmly. This is your return on investment. I calculated the compound interest of kindness. This is honorary stock in Vance Healthcare. It makes you a major shareholder. It makes you wealthy, Zeke. You never have to sleep in a basement again. You never have to take orders from anyone. I held the check. My hands were shaking. $50 million. It was enough to buy a fleet of boats. It was enough to buy the whole neighborhood where Vivian lived. It was freedom. But then I thought about Vivian. I thought about the slap. I thought about the contract she tried to make me sign, admitting I was crazy. If I took this money, Vivian would just try to take it. She would sue me. She would claim it was marital property. She would gaslight me until I believed I didn't deserve it. Money wouldn't fix the hole in my chest where my dignity used to be. I looked at Elena. I placed the check gently on the coffee table. I can't take this, Ellie. Elena looked shocked. Zeke, it's yours. You earned it. I shook my head. You don't understand. If I take this home, Vivian will destroy me for it. She will turn it into poison. She has controlled every penny I've earned for 40 years. If I walk in there with $50 million, she won't respect me. She will just see a bigger bank account to manage. Elena leaned forward, her brow furrowed. Then what do you want? Name it. A house. A car? I can buy you an island, Zeke. I looked her in the eye. I want my wife to respect me, I said, my voice breaking. I want her to look at me and see a man, not a servant. I want my son to look at me without shame. I want them to know that they were wrong about me, not because I'm rich, but because I'm me. Elena stared at me for a long moment. Then a slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. It wasn't the smile of the grateful student anymore. It was the smile of the shark that ate the other sharks. She picked up the check and tore it in half. You are right, she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Money is too easy. Vivian doesn't care about money. She cares about status. She cares about power. If you go home with a check, she wins. She stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the city like a queen surveying her kingdom. Uncle Zeke, she said, turning back to me. That woman will never respect you. Respect requires a soul, and I think she sold hers a long time ago. But if you want to teach her a lesson, if you want to show her exactly who she married, and I can help you do that. She walked back and took my hands. We aren't going to give you money. We are going to give you power. We are going to put you in a position where she has to look up to you, where she has to answer to you. How I asked, she smirked. I just bought her hospital, Zeke, and I haven't appointed a chairman of the board yet. She squeezed my hands. Go home. Let her think she's won. Let her think you're weak. Let her think you're broken. Because when we are done with her, she is going to wish she had never learned to spell your name. I looked at the torn check on the table, then at the fire in Elena's eyes. I nodded. Okay, Ellie, let's do it. I walked the last 2 blocks to the house, the cold wind biting at my face, but it couldn't cool the fire burning in my chest. The chauffeur had offered to drive me right to the door, but I refused. I couldn't let them see the Rolls-Royce again. They had to believe I was defeated. They had to believe I had walked away from Elena Vance with nothing but my pride, which to them was worth less than nothing. I touched the pocket where I had hidden the business card, my only lifeline in the shark tank I was about to re-enter. When I opened the front door, I expected silence. I expected to be ignored, to be treated like a ghost haunting the hallways. Instead, I walked into a hurricane. The living room was a disaster zone. Cushions were thrown on the floor, drawers were pulled out, and papers were scattered everywhere. In the center of the chaos stood Vivian and Chloe, panting like wild animals. When they saw me, they didn't look guilty. They looked like predators who had finally cornered their prey. Where is it? Vivian screamed, lunging at me. She grabbed the lapels of my wrinkled jacket and shook me, her nails digging into my chest through the fabric. Where is what I asked, keeping my voice low and steady, though my heart hammered against my ribs. The money, Isaiah. The check. Chloe shrieked, coming up behind her. We know she gave you something. Elena Vance doesn't just invite a janitor to lunch to chat about the good old days. She bought you off. Where did you hide it? They began to pat me down. My own wife and daughter-in-law tearing at my clothes, reaching into my pockets, their hands frantic and greedy. They turned my pockets inside out. They checked my socks. They even ripped off my shoes and shook them upside down. Nothing fell out but a little bit of dust. I stood there, letting them violate my dignity, feeling a cold detachment settle over me. They were looking for a check. They had no idea I had come back with something far more dangerous. You are useless. Vivian pushed me away, her face twisted in disgust. You sat there with a billionaire for 2 hours and you got nothing. You didn't ask for a settlement, you didn't ask for compensation for the years of poverty I endured because of you. I didn't ask for anything, Vivian, I said. We just talked. You are a senile old fool, Chloe spat, kicking my shoe across the room. You had a golden ticket and you threw it away. You are too stupid to even be greedy. God, you are a waste of space. Get out of my sight, Vivian growled. Go to your room. And by room, I mean the basement. If you aren't going to contribute to this family, you aren't going to enjoy its comforts. I went down to the basement without a word. I sat on the cot listening to them stomp around upstairs, cursing my name. I knew this was the calm before the storm. They were desperate. Their financial house of cards was crumbling, and they had pinned their hopes on a payout from Elena. Now that they thought I had come back empty-handed, I knew they would move to the next phase of their plan. They needed control of my pension, my social security, and the equity in the house. And to get that, they needed to prove I was unfit. The war began the next morning. I woke up with a pounding headache. My blood pressure had been creeping up lately, the stress of the last few months taking its toll on my heart. I went upstairs to the kitchen to take my medication. The bottle was sitting on the counter where I always left it. Chloe was there chopping vegetables with a large knife. She didn't look at me. She was humming a little tune, a smile playing on her lips that didn't match the coldness in her eyes. "Morning, Zeke," she said cheerfully. "Did you sleep well in your dungeon?" I ignored her and unscrewed the cap of my pill bottle. I tipped a pill into my hand. It looked different. The blue was a slightly lighter shade. The shape was just a fraction rounder. "What is this?" I asked, holding up the pill. "It is your medicine, Zeke," Chloe said, not missing a beat in her chopping. "Don't be paranoid." I looked at the bottle. The label was correct. My name was on it. But I had worked in a hospital for 30 years. I knew what medications looked like. "This isn't my blood pressure pill," I said. Chloe slammed the knife down. "Oh my God, here we go. The paranoia. You are losing it, old man. I picked that refill up from the pharmacy myself yesterday. Just take the damn pill or have a stroke. See if I care." I hesitated. If I didn't take it, my pressure would spike. If I did take it and it was wrong. But I had to play the part. I had to be the confused, dependent old man. I swallowed the pill with a glass of water. Within an hour, I knew something was wrong. My head didn't clear. Instead, a heavy fog descended over my brain. My limbs felt like lead. I sat in the armchair in the corner of the living room trying to read the newspaper, but the words kept swimming in front of my eyes. I felt dizzy, weak, and incredibly tired. Chloe walked in, watching me closely. "You look terrible, Zeke," she observed, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Are you confused again? Do you know what day it is?" "It is Wednesday," I slurred. My tongue felt thick. "It is Friday, Zeke," she corrected me, laughing. "See, you are losing track of time. Your brain is turning to mush." I tried to stand up, but my knees buckled. I sank back into the chair. Later that afternoon, the real torture began. I went to the kitchen to get a glass of water. I reached into my pocket for my wallet. It was gone. I patted my pants. I checked the table next to my chair. Nothing. Looking for something, Vivian asked, walking into the room. She was holding a glass of wine, watching me with hawk-like intensity. "My wallet," I mumbled. "I had it this morning." She sighed, a long, exaggerated sound of exhaustion. "Oh, Isaiah, not again. We just went through this yesterday." "We didn't go through this yesterday," I said, trying to fight through the fog in my brain. "Yes, we did. You lost it yesterday, too. Check the refrigerator." "The refrigerator? Why would my wallet be in the refrigerator?" "Just check it," she commanded. I walked to the fridge and opened the door. There, sitting on the middle shelf next to the milk carton, was my old leather wallet. I stared at it. I knew I hadn't put it there. I knew it. But the drug Chloe had given me was making it hard to think straight. Was I losing my mind? Had the stress finally broken me? see, Vivian said from behind me. You are deteriorating, Isaiah. It is getting dangerous. First, the wallet in the fridge. What is next? Leaving the gas on. Burning the house down while we sleep. I grabbed the wallet. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. You put it there, I whispered. Vivian laughed. It was a cold, cruel sound. Why would I touch your filthy wallet? You are sick, Isaiah. You need help. And we are going to make sure you get it. The rest of the day was a blur of misplaced items and accusations. My keys were found in the trash can. My reading glasses were found in the toilet tank. Every time I turned around, something was missing, and every time it was found in a bizarre place, Chloe and Vivian were there to witness it, shaking their heads, whispering to each other, looking at me with pity that masked their malice. They were gaslighting me. They were systematically dismantling my reality, trying to make me doubt my own sanity, so that when they finally made their move, I wouldn't have the strength to fight back. By the time Marcus came home from work, I was exhausted. The fake pills had drained my energy, leaving me lethargic and confused. I was sitting at the dinner table staring at an empty plate. They hadn't served me dinner yet. Marcus walked in looking more nervous than usual. He kissed Chloe, avoided looking at me, and sat down. We need to talk, he said, his voice tight. Vivian nodded. Go ahead, son. Tell him. Marcus turned to me. He looked at my hands resting on the table, not my face. Dad, he began. We have been talking. Chloe, Mom, and I, we are very worried about you. I said nothing. I just breathed, trying to keep my heart rate steady. The incident at the gala Marcus continued. The confusion today, the wallet in the fridge, the keys in the trash. It is clear that you are not yourself. You are struggling, and we can't provide the level of care you need here. It isn't safe for you, and it isn't fair to us. He took a deep breath, as if he were about to dive underwater. We made a call today, Dad, to a place called Sunrise Senior Living. Sunrise. The name sounded pleasant, hopeful, but I knew what Sunrise was. It was a state-subsidized facility on the outskirts of the city. It was where people sent their relatives when the money ran out. It was a place of urine-stained hallways, overworked staff, and residents who sat in wheelchairs staring at walls until they died. It was a warehouse for the forgotten. We got you a bed, Chloe interjected, a triumphant smirk breaking through her mask of concern. They had a cancellation. It is very lucky. Usually the waiting list is months long. They are coming to pick you up the day after tomorrow, Marcus said. Saturday morning. The silence that followed was deafening. I looked at my son, the boy I had taught to ride a bike, the boy I had held when he cried over his first heartbreak, the boy I had worked myself to the bone for so he would never have to clean a toilet or fix a boiler. You are sending me away, I asked, my voice barely a whisper. You are evicting me from my own home. It is not your home anymore, Dad. Marcus said, his voice hardening slightly, probably rehearsed by Chloe. You can't maintain it. You can't contribute, and frankly, you are a danger. This is for the best. You will be safe there. Safe, I repeated. Safe in a place where the ratio of nurses to patients is 1 to 50. Safe in a place where the food is mush and the doors are locked from the outside. We already signed the admission papers, Vivian said, sipping her wine. As your next of kin and given your evident mental decline, we didn't need your signature. We explained the situation to the director. He understands that you might be resistant. He knows that dementia patients often get aggressive when they are confused. Dementia patients. They had already labeled me. They had already constructed the narrative. I looked at them, the three of them sitting around the table eating roast chicken while I sat with an empty plate. They were eating the food I paid for in the house I bought, planning my disposal like I was an old piece of furniture. I felt a surge of rage, so pure it burned through the fog of the fake medication. I wanted to flip the table. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them about the hospital, about Elena, about the fact that I was now the chairman of the board of the very institution they worshipped. But I stopped myself. If I exploded now, I would play right into their hands. Aggression would be proof of my dementia. Screaming would be proof of my instability. They would call the police, they would sedate me, and I would wake up in Sunrise strapped to a bed before I could make a single phone call. I had to be smarter. I had to be patient. Elena had a plan, but her plan required timing. I had to survive until the board meeting. I had to survive until the day after tomorrow. I looked at Marcus. Okay, I said softly. They all blinked. They had expected a fight. They had expected screaming. "Okay," Marcus asked. "If that is what you think is best, son," I said, lowering my head submissively. I am tired. Maybe you are right. Maybe I am confused." Chloe's eyes narrowed suspiciously, but Vivian smiled, a cold, victorious smile. "See?" she said. "He knows. Deep down he knows he is useless. This is a moment of clarity. We should be grateful." She stood up and scraped the leftovers from her plate onto mine. "Chicken bones and half-eaten potatoes. Eat up, Isaiah," she said. "You will need your strength for the move." I looked at the scraps on my plate. I picked up a fork, and I ate. I ate because I needed the energy. I ate because every bite fueled the fire in my gut. I ate because I knew that this was the last meal I would ever eat as a victim, the day after tomorrow. That was the deadline. They thought they were sending me to a prison. They didn't know they were sending me to my coronation. But first, I had to survive the next 48 hours in a house with 3 people who wanted me gone, fueled by drugs that were trying to erase my mind. I finished the food. I stood up. Good. I walked to the basement door. "Good night, family," I said. I closed the door behind me and listened to the lock click. I sat on the cot and reached for the loose brick in the wall where I had hidden the real blood pressure pills I had stashed months ago for emergencies. I spat out the residue of the fake vitamin I had held under my tongue at dinner. I took a real pill. I waited for my head to clear. 2 days. I could do 2 days. And then the sunrise would come. But it wouldn't be the nursing home. It would be the dawn of a reckoning they never saw coming. The rumble of the engine vibrated through the floorboards of the basement, shaking the dust from the exposed pipes above my head. It wasn't the sputtering cough of Marcus's old sedan, nor the smooth purr of Vivian's Mercedes. This was a growl, aggressive and deep, the sound of a machine that cost more than I had earned in my first 10 years of working at the hospital. I stood up from the cot, my joints popping in protest, and walked to the small, grime-encrusted window that looked out at ground level to the driveway. Through the smudged glass, I saw it, a brand-new jet-black Porsche Cayenne. It gleamed in the afternoon sun, a sleek beast of leather and chrome sitting right where my vegetable garden used to be before Chloe convinced Marcus to pave it over. The driver's door opened and my son stepped out. He was grinning, spinning a key fob on his finger, looking at the car with a hunger I had never seen him direct toward a human being. A cold knot of suspicion tightened in my stomach. Marcus had been complaining about money for months. He couldn't pay his rent. He couldn't pay his credit cards. He was drowning in debt. How could he possibly afford a car that cost upwards of $100,000? I turned away from the window and looked at the ceiling. The suspicion turned into a terrifying realization. There was only one place that kind of money could have come from. I didn't care about Vivian's orders anymore. I didn't care about the basement. I climbed the stairs, pushing open the door with a force that surprised me. The house was quiet save for the hum of the refrigerator. I went straight to the small desk in the hallway where the mail was kept. My hands were shaking as I rifled through the stack of envelopes until I found it. The bank statement from the joint savings account. This was the account I had opened 40 years ago. It was the account where I deposited $50 every single week, rain or shine. It was the in case of emergency fund. It was the retirement fund I had built with sweat and aching muscles intended for the days when my body finally gave out. I tore the envelope open. I unfolded the paper. My eyes scanned down to the balance line. 0. I blinked. I looked again. $0 and 0 cents. Above it, a single transaction dated 2 days ago. A wire transfer of $150,000 to Porsche of downtown Chicago. The air left my lungs. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. That money wasn't just numbers on a page. That money was my life. It was every skipped lunch. It was every double shift. It was the safety net I had woven to ensure I would never be a burden. And it was gone. The front door opened. Marcus walked in, still twirling the keys, humming a tune. When he saw me standing there holding the bank statement, he didn't jump. He didn't look guilty. He just stopped humming and sighed as if I were a child who had found a present before Christmas. "Dad," he said, his tone bored. "What are you doing out of the basement? Mom said you were supposed to stay down there until the movers come tomorrow." I held up the paper. My hand was trembling so hard the paper rattled. "You stole it," I whispered. My voice was barely audible. "You stole my retirement." Marcus rolled his eyes. He walked past me into the kitchen and opened the fridge, grabbing a bottle of sparkling water. "I didn't steal anything, Dad. It is a joint account. Mom's name is on it. She authorized the transfer. Technically, it is family money. It was my money. I shouted, my voice finally finding its strength. I saved that for 40 years, Marcus. That was for emergencies. That was for when I couldn't work anymore. Marcus took a sip of water and leaned against the counter, looking at me with a mixture of pity and annoyance. Dad, look at yourself, he said, gesturing to my wrinkled clothes and my unshaven face. You are going to a state facility tomorrow. Sunrise Senior Living. Do you know what that means? It means the state pays for your care. You don't need money. You are going to have a bed 3 meals a day and nurses to wipe your chin. What does a man in a nursing home need with $150,000? I stared at him. I tried to find the boy I had carried on my shoulders. I tried to find the son who used to draw me pictures for Father's Day, but he was gone, consumed by the greed of the women he surrounded himself with. So you bought a car? I asked, my voice shaking with rage. You took my life savings and you bought a toy for your wife. Chloe deserves it. Marcus snapped, his face hardening. She has put up with a lot, Dad, living in this house with you, creeping around, dealing with your dementia. She needed a pick-me-up. Besides, think of it as an early inheritance. An inheritance. I stepped closer to him. I am not dead, Marcus. Marcus shrugged. He looked me right in the eye, and what he said next shattered whatever piece of my heart was still intact. You might as well be Dad. The cruelty of it took my breath away. He didn't see me as a person. He saw me as a walking corpse that hadn't had the decency to lie down yet. You are going to that home tomorrow, he continued, his voice cold and practical. You are going to deteriorate. That is what happens. You will forget who we are. You will forget who you are. Why should that money sit in a bank account rotting away while you rot away? We can use it now. We have a life to live. Mom agreed. She signed the transfer. She said it was the least you could do to pay us back for the burden you have become. The burden. That word again. You are a thief, Marcus, I said, my voice low and dangerous. You are a thief and a coward. You didn't earn a dime of that money. You have never worked a hard day in your life. Marcus laughed. A short, sharp bark. And you have. You pushed a broom, Dad. Congratulations. You are a hero. Now get back downstairs before Chloe sees you. She wants to take the new car for a spin, and she doesn't need you ruining her mood. Before I could answer, the sound of heels clicking on the hardwood floor echoed through the hallway. Vivian walked into the kitchen. She was wearing her white coat, her stethoscope around her neck. She looked impeccable, powerful, and utterly heartless. She saw the bank statement in my hand. She saw the rage in my eyes. She didn't flinch. She walked over to the kitchen table and threw a thick manila envelope onto the wood. It landed with a heavy slap. Good you are up here, she said, not even looking at Marcus. It saves me the trip to the dungeon. She tapped the envelope with a manicured fingernail. Sign these, Isaiah. Now. I looked at the envelope. Divorce decree was printed in bold letters on the top document. I looked up at her. Divorce. After 40 years, Vivian crossed her arms. Her face was like stone. It is over, Isaiah. I have tolerated you for decades. I tolerated your lack of ambition. I tolerated your smell. I tolerated your embarrassing job. But I will not tolerate a husband who is mentally unstable. She looked at me with pure disgust. Tomorrow you are going to Sunrise. You will be a ward of the state. And I am about to be promoted to chairman of the board by the new owner. Do you think I can have a husband in a budget nursing home dragging down my reputation? Do you think I want people whispering that the director is married to a senile pauper? No. I need to cut the dead weight. She pushed the papers closer to me. I have spoken to my lawyers. Since you are incapacitated, this is a mercy. We are splitting the assets. I keep the house, the cars, and my pension. You get to keep your clothes. And the $150,000 I asked, pointing to the bank statement in my hand. Did you split that too? Vivian scoffed. That is already spent, Isaiah. That is gone. Consider it payment for the 40 years of housing I provided you. Now sign the papers. I want this finalized before the movers come tomorrow. I want to be a single woman when I walk into that boardroom next week. I looked at the papers. I looked at the pen she had placed next to them. They had taken everything. My home, my money, my dignity. And now she wanted to erase our marriage as if it were a stain on her resume. I picked up the pen. Marcus smirked. Good boy, Dad. Just make it easy on yourself. Vivian checked her watch. Hurry up, Isaiah. I have a dinner reservation. I held the pen over the signature line. My hand hovered there. I remembered the torn check in Elena's office. I remembered her promise. If I signed this, I would be free. I wouldn't be her husband anymore. I wouldn't be under her thumb. But if I signed it now, they would think they won. They would think they broke me. I looked at Vivian. You want a divorce? I asked. Yes, she snapped. I want to be done with you. Good, I said. I didn't sign. Instead, I closed the folder. I picked it up. I will have my lawyer review this, I said calmly. Vivian laughed. It was a high, shrill sound. Your lawyer. You don't have a lawyer, Isaiah. You don't have $1 to your name. You can't even afford a bus ticket. I tucked the folder under my arm. You might be surprised, Vivian, I said. You might be very surprised at what I can afford. I turned and walked toward the basement door. Where are you going with those papers? Vivian shrieked, lunging for me. Give them back. You sign them now. I stopped and turned. I looked at her with a gaze so cold it stopped her in her tracks. If you touch me, Vivian, I said, my voice low and vibrating with a power I hadn't felt in years, I will walk out that front door right now. I will walk to the police station. And I will tell them about the pills. I will tell them about the stolen money. And I will tell them that the director of St. Jude's is abusing a vulnerable senior citizen. Do you think your promotion will survive that investigation? Vivian froze. Her eyes darted to Marcus. Fear for the first time flickered behind her mask. You wouldn't dare, she whispered. You are confused. No one would believe you. Try me, I said. I opened the basement door. I will see you tomorrow, Vivian, when the movers come. I walked down the stairs and closed the door. I heard them screaming at each other upstairs. I heard Marcus cursing. I heard Vivian throwing things. I sat on the cot and placed the divorce papers next to me. I reached for the loose brick in the wall and pulled out the small burner phone Elena had given me in the car, the one I hadn't told anyone about. I dialed the number. It is Zeke, I said when she answered. Zeke, Elena's voice was warm. Are you okay? They stole my retirement, I said, my voice steady. And she served me with divorce papers. There was a silence on the line, a cold, dangerous silence. Good, Elena said finally. That makes it easier. Easier? Yes, she said. Because now when we take her down, we don't have to worry about you going down with her. Zeke. The board meeting is in 48 hours. Can you hold on? I looked at the damp walls of my prison. I looked at the divorce papers that symbolized the end of my life as a servant. I can hold on, Ellie, I said. Good. Because I just found the ledger for the hospital's discretionary fund. And Zeke. Vivian hasn't just been stealing from you. She has been stealing from the hospital for 10 years. I closed my eyes. Get everything ready, I said. I am ready, she promised. Sleep well, Mr. Chairman. I hung up the phone. I lay back on the cot. Upstairs, my family was celebrating their victory, driving their new car, planning my funeral. But down here in the dark, I was smiling. Because tomorrow wasn't the end. Tomorrow was the day the janitor took out the trash. I wasn't going to wait for the movers. I wasn't going to wait for the men in white coats to drag me out of the house I had paid for with 40 years of sweat and blood. The sun had barely risen when I zipped up the old leather suitcase. It was the same bag I had carried when I moved into this house 30 years ago. Inside, I had my one good suit, the divorce papers Vivian had thrown at me, and the burner phone Elena had given me. That was it. That was the sum total of my life, according to my family. I opened the basement door and stepped into the hallway. The house was quiet. I thought I could slip out the front door before anyone woke up. I wanted to walk away with my head held high, not be escorted out like a prisoner. I made it to the bottom of the main staircase when I heard a floorboard creak above me. Going somewhere, Zeke. I looked up. Chloe was standing at the top of the stairs. She was wearing a silk kimono and holding a steaming mug of tea. Her eyes landed on the suitcase in my hand, and her lips curled into a sneer. I am leaving, Chloe, I said, my voice rough. You want me gone? I am going. She laughed, a sharp, brittle sound that echoed in the high-ceilinged foyer. You are stealing family property, she said, starting to descend the stairs. That suitcase belongs to the estate. Vivian said you leave with nothing. It is my bag, Chloe. She reached the landing halfway down the stairs. I was 3 steps below her. She blocked my path, her body language aggressive and territorial. Open it, she commanded. I want to see what you took. Silverware, jewelry. Did you steal Marcus's watch? I gripped the handle tighter. I didn't take anything. Get out of my way. I tried to step around her. She moved to block me. She grabbed the handle of the suitcase. Give it to me, she shrieked, yanking it. I held on. I wasn't going to let her take the last shred of my dignity. Let go, Chloe. I didn't push her. I swear on my mother's grave I didn't touch her. I just pulled the bag back toward me. But Chloe, in her fury, decided to escalate. She let go of the bag with one hand and shoved me. She shoved me hard right in the chest with both hands. Oops, she whispered, her eyes wide with a malicious delight. My heel caught the edge of the step. I felt gravity take hold. My arms flailed, searching for a railing that wasn't there. I fell backward. The world tumbled, the ceiling, the floor, the chandelier. Then came the impact. I hit the hardwood floor at the bottom of the stairs with a sickening crunch. A bolt of lightning shot up my left leg, exploding in my hip. I heard the bone snap. It was a loud, dry crack, like a tree branch breaking in a storm. I screamed. I couldn't help it. The pain was absolute. It was a white-hot fire that consumed my entire body. I curled into a ball, clutching my leg, gasping for air. Chloe stood on the stairs looking down at me. She didn't look horrified. She didn't look sorry. She looked curious, like a child watching an insect she had just crushed. Oh my God, she said, her voice flat. You are so clumsy. Vivian, Marcus, she yelled, turning her head toward the bedrooms. Come quick. The old man fell. I lay there grinding my teeth, trying not to pass out. The pain was a living thing pulsing with every beat of my heart. Vivian came running down the stairs in her nightgown, Marcus trailing behind her, rubbing sleep from his eyes. When Vivian saw me lying in a heap at the bottom of the stairs, seeing the unnatural angle of my leg, she didn't rush to my side. She didn't check my pulse. She stopped next to Chloe. What happened? Vivian asked, looking at me with annoyance. He tried to attack me. Chloe lied instantly, her voice trembling with fake fear. He was trying to steal the silver. I tried to stop him, and he just tripped. He is so unstable, Vivian. He lunged at me. Vivian looked at the suitcase. Then she looked at me. She saw the pain in my eyes. She saw the sweat beading on my forehead. Marcus took a step toward me. Dad! Oh God, his leg. Mom, call 911. Stop! Vivian barked. Marcus froze. Why? He is hurt. Look at his leg. Vivian walked down the last few steps and stood over me. She looked at my broken leg, then at my face. Her eyes were cold, calculating. She was doing math in her head. Don't call 911 yet, she said calmly. What? Marcus asked, horrified. Mom, he is in agony, I said. Wait, Vivian snapped. Think, Marcus. Use your brain for once. She crouched down, not to help me, but to bring her face close to mine. I could smell her expensive night cream. This is it, she whispered to herself, a slow smile spreading across her face. This is the proof. She stood up and turned to Chloe and Marcus. Listen to me closely. We are not calling an ambulance yet. If we call now, he might tell them he was pushed. He might try to blame Chloe. We need to make sure the story is straight. Vivian. I gasped, the pain making my vision blur. Help me, please. She ignored me. She looked at her watch. We wait 20 minutes, she declared. 20 minutes, Marcus shouted. Mom, that is torture. It is necessary, Vivian hissed. We need him confused. We need him in shock. By the time the paramedics get here, the pain needs to be so bad that he can't think straight. He needs to be rambling. He needs to look delirious. She turned to Chloe. Go get the vodka from the cabinet. Pour some on his shirt. Splash some on the floor. Chloe's eyes lit up. I understand. He was drunk. He fell because he was drunk and confused. No. I tried to shout, but it came out as a groan. I don't drink. You do now, Vivian said. Chloe ran to the kitchen. Marcus stood there wringing his hands, looking at me with tears in his eyes, but doing absolutely nothing to stop them. Marcus, I wheezed. Son, please. I can't. Dad. he whispered. I can't go against her. Chloe came back with a bottle of cheap vodka. She uncapped it and splashed it over my chest. The smell of alcohol filled my nose, making me gag. She poured a puddle on the floor next to my head. Perfect, Vivian said. Now here's the story. Isaiah has been wandering the house all night. He was hallucinating. He thought he was at the airport. That is why he has the suitcase. He was drinking. He tried to go down the stairs. He lost his balance and he fell. It is a tragedy caused by his cognitive decline. I lay there for 30 minutes. 30 minutes of hell. My leg throbbed with a violence that made me wish for unconsciousness. I listened to the clock ticking. I listened to them rehearsing their lies. Finally, Vivian pulled out her phone. She put on her best worried wife voice. 911, please hurry. It is my husband. He fell down the stairs. There is so much blood. He is confused. Please help us. She hung up and looked down at me. Don't bother trying to talk, Isaiah, she said. No one listens to a drunk, senile old man. The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens and pain. Vivian rode in the back with me, holding my hand whenever the paramedics looked, squeezing it hard enough to bruise. She told them the story, the wandering, the vodka, the dementia. They nodded sympathetically. They looked at me with pity. We arrived at St. Jude's, Vivian's hospital, her kingdom. As they wheeled me into the emergency bay, the atmosphere changed. Nurses and doctors snapped to attention when they saw Vivian. Mrs. Freeman, oh my God, what happened? My husband. Vivian cried, running alongside the gurney. He had another episode. He fell. Please get Dr. Finch. Only Dr. Finch. Dr. Finch was a weasel of a man, the chief of internal medicine and Vivian's lapdog. He owed his career to her. When he saw me, he didn't see a patient. He saw an order from his boss. Get him into Trauma 1, Finch barked. Mrs. Freeman, I am so sorry. They moved me onto a hospital bed. The pain when they shifted my leg was so intense I blacked out for a second. When I came to, Vivian was standing next to Dr. Finch, whispering furiously. She was pointing at me, then at a clipboard. I need this documented correctly, Arthur, she was saying. This wasn't just a fall. This is the progression. Look at him. He is aggressive. He is disoriented. We found him with a suitcase claiming he was going to catch a flight to Paris. Paris? I croaked. I never said Paris? Shh, Isaiah. Vivian soothed, stroking my forehead with ice-cold fingers. You are safe now. Stop fighting. She looked at Finch. He needs to be sedated, Arthur, for his own safety. And I need the admission report to reflect the reality of his condition. Cognitive impairment, secondary to advanced dementia, resulting in self-harm. Finch nodded, scribbling on the chart. Of course, Vivian. It is clear as day. The alcohol smell alone, obviously self-medicating for the confusion. We will run the toxicology, but I will put the preliminary diagnosis in now. Traumatic injury due to senile dementia, Dr. Finch. I said, grabbing his lab coat with my good hand. Listen to me. She pushed me. Chloe pushed me. I am not drunk. They poured it on me. Finch looked at my hand on his coat with distaste. He peeled my fingers off. It is okay, Mr. Freeman, he said condescendingly. We are going to give you something to help you relax. You are very confused right now. No, I shouted. I am the chairman. Check the records. Elena Vance. Vivian laughed, a sad, tragic sound for the benefit of the nurses. Oh, Arthur, do you hear him? He still thinks he knows Elena Vance. It is heartbreaking. He has been obsessing over her since he saw her on TV. Finch shook his head. The mind is a fragile thing. Nurse, bring the Haldol, 5 milligrams, and prep him for surgery. A nurse appeared with a syringe. I tried to pull away, but the pain in my leg anchored me to the bed. Vivian leaned in close, her lips brushing my ear. This is it, Isaiah, she whispered. Once this is in your medical file, you are finished. No judge will believe you, no lawyer will touch you. You are officially incompetent. After the surgery, you are going straight to the psych ward for evaluation, and from there, well, Sunrise will look like a luxury hotel compared to where I am sending you. She stood up and nodded to the nurse. Do it. I felt the needle prick my arm. I tried to fight the darkness. I tried to hold on to the image of Elena, of the plan, of the justice I was promised. But the drug was fast. The room started to spin. The lights dimmed. The last thing I saw was Vivian's face smiling down at me like an angel of death. "You lose, Isaiah," she said. And then there was nothing but black. Fan 8, Koko Trien đã được vịt hoàn chỉnh tập trung vào ba xung đột chính theo yêu cầu sự cô lập của Isaiah mang giải cứu hoàn trang của Elena cùng đội ngũ luật sư và khu lạt bài với băng chung camera an ninh. Bạn có muốn tôi tiếp tục triển khai phần 9 kế hoạch phản công im lặng là vàng, không? Ở phần này, Isaiah sẽ phải đóng kịch giả vờ bị liệt và mất trí nhớ để dụ Vivian và đồng bọn vào cái bẫy cuối cùng trước khi cắt lưỡi tại buổi lễ kỷ niệm. The video on the tablet screen ended, freezing on the image of Chloe's hands shoving my chest, her face twisted in a mask of pure malice. I lay in the hospital bed, my leg encased in a heavy cast, my chest burning from the vodka they had poured on me, but the fire inside my gut was hotter. I looked up at Elena. She was standing at the foot of the bed, flanked by two men in expensive suits who looked like they ate prosecutors for breakfast. "Call them!" I rasped, my voice thick with the remnants of the sedation. "Call the police, Ellie. I want that girl in handcuffs. I want her charged with attempted murder. I want Vivian fired. I want Marcus—" I stopped, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I want my son to see what he has become." Elena took the tablet from my hands. She looked at me with a gaze that was soft with sympathy but hard with resolve. "We can do that, Zeke," she said calmly. "We can call the police right now. They will arrest Chloe. They might charge her with assault. She will get a lawyer. She will plead it down to an accident. She will cry in court. She will get probation. And Vivian, she will spin this. She will say she wasn't there when you fell. She will say she did her best to care for you. She will keep her job. She will keep her pension. And she will keep her reputation." She walked to the side of the bed and sat down, taking my hand. "Is that what you want? A slap on the wrist? Or do you want to finish this?" I looked at her. Finish it, how Elena leaned in, her eyes gleaming with a dangerous intelligence. "We let them think they won. We let them think you are exactly what they put in that medical report, a senile, broken, helpless old man." I frowned. "Why?" "Because the hospital's 30th anniversary gala is in 3 days," she said. "It is the biggest event in the history of St. Jude's. The governor will be there. The press will be there. And Vivian believes that night is going to be her coronation. She thinks I'm going to announce her promotion to CEO of the entire regional network." She squeezed my hand. "If we arrest them now, it is a private tragedy. If we expose them then on stage in front of the entire world while she is reaching for the crown, that is not just justice, Zeke. That is total destruction. We don't just take her freedom. We take her legacy. We take her pride. We take the only thing she has ever loved more than money, her image." I thought about it. I thought about the way Vivian had looked at me when I lay at the bottom of the stairs, the calculation, the coldness. She didn't just want me hurt, she wanted me erased. "What do I have to do?" I asked. "You have to be the vegetable she wants you to be," Elena said. "You have to play the part. You are confused. You are weak. You can't remember what happened on the stairs. You can barely speak." She looked at the lawyers. "My team has blocked the transfer to the psych ward. We told Vivian that due to your fragile state and my personal interest in your case as an old acquaintance, you are to remain in the VIP suite for observation until the gala. She bought it. She thinks I am just being sentimental. She has no idea I own the cameras in her house. So I just lie here?" I asked. "You lie here and you let her show her true colors," Elena said. "Let her dig the hole deeper. Let her believe she is untouchable. Because when people think they are untouchable, Zeke, that is when they make mistakes. That is when they get greedy." I nodded slowly. The pain in my leg was a constant reminder of why I was doing this. "Okay," I said. "Let them in." Elena and her lawyers left the room through a side door. A few minutes later, the main door opened. Vivian walked in. She was wearing her white coat, looking every inch the concerned medical professional. But the moment the door clicked shut and we were alone, her face dropped. She walked to the bed and looked down at me. She didn't check my chart. She didn't ask how I was feeling. She just stared, searching my eyes for a sign of the man who had defied her in the kitchen. I kept my face blank. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I stared past her, focusing on a spot on the wall. I let my hand twitch on the sheet. "Isaiah," she said sharply. I didn't answer. I blinked slowly, lethargically. "Can you hear me?" she asked, leaning closer. I turned my head slowly toward her. I narrowed my eyes as if I were trying to recognize a stranger. "Who?" I mumbled, letting the word trail off into a slur. "Water." Vivian straightened up. A slow, cruel smile spread across her red lips. She let out a breath she must have been holding since the ambulance ride. "It worked," she whispered to herself. "The fall, the shock, the drugs. It actually worked." She didn't get me water. Instead, she pulled out her phone and dialed a number. "Chloe," she said, her voice bright with triumph. "It is me. You can stop worrying. He is gone. The lights are on, but nobody is home. He doesn't even know who I am. Yes, completely vegetative. It is perfect." She laughed a sound that chilled me more than the basement ever had. "Get the paperwork ready for the Sunrise facility, but tell them to downgrade the package. He doesn't need a private room anymore. A ward bed is fine. He won't know the difference. And Chloe, start measuring the room for your gym. The old man isn't coming back." She hung up and looked at me again with pure contempt. "You finally did something right, Isaiah," she said. "You broke. Now I can finally fix my life." For the next 2 days, I endured a hell of my own making. I lay in that bed staring at the ceiling while Vivian paraded people through the room. She brought in colleagues to show off her devotion to her ailing husband. She held my hand and wiped fake tears while telling them how tragic it was how I had deteriorated so quickly. "He was such a simple man," she told the chief of surgery. "He never had much ambition, but to lose his mind like this. It is a blessing in disguise, really. He is at peace." I wanted to scream. I wanted to strangle her, but I held on to Elena's promise. Let them climb higher. On the morning of the 3rd day, the day of the gala, Vivian arrived early. She wasn't alone. She had a man with her, a notary public who looked bored and tired, and she was holding a document that I recognized immediately. It was the deed to the house on Elm Street. This wasn't the big house we lived in. This was the small 2-bedroom cottage my parents had left me. It was the only property solely in my name. It was the only thing Vivian couldn't touch because it was an inheritance separate from our marital assets. I had kept it for 30 years, renting it out to low-income families at a loss just to keep my parents' legacy alive. Vivian dismissed the nurse with a wave of her hand. She approached the bed. "Wake up, Isaiah," she said, not bothering to lower her voice. "We have business." I turned my head slowly, giving her the blank stare she expected. She placed the document on the tray table and pushed it over my lap. "We are transferring the Elm Street property to Marcus," she stated. "He needs the equity to pay off some debts, and you certainly don't need it anymore." She didn't ask me to read it. She knew I wouldn't understand it, or at least she thought I wouldn't. She didn't hand me a pen to sign my name. She knew a signature from a man in my condition might be contested. Instead, she pulled a small blue ink pad from her pocket. "This is for your own good," she lied, grabbing my right hand. Her grip was cold and clammy. She pressed my thumb onto the ink pad. The wet sponge felt cold against my skin. I felt a surge of violation so intense it almost broke my character. That house was my father's sweat. It was my mother's garden. It was the place I was born. And she was stealing it with my own hand. I twitched. I tried to pull my hand back, just a fraction, a reflex of resistance. Vivian dug her fingernails into my wrist. "Hold still, you old fool," she hissed. "Don't fight me now." She forced my hand down onto the paper. She pressed my thumb against the signature line, rolling it side to side to ensure a clear print. "There," she said, wiping the ink from my thumb with a rough tissue. "Done." She handed the document to the notary. He stamped it without even looking at me. He didn't ask if I was aware. He didn't ask if I consented. He just saw a director of a hospital and a vegetable, and he did his job. Vivian picked up the deed and smiled. It was the smile of a woman who had just won the lottery. Finally, she said, "I have cleaned up your mess. The house is gone. The savings are gone. And tomorrow, you will be gone." She leaned down and kissed me on the forehead. It was the kiss of Judas. "I have a gala to prepare for Isaiah. I am going to be CEO tonight. And you are going to be a memory." She turned and walked out of the room, her heels clicking a rhythm of victory. I lay there staring at the blue stain on my thumb. The ink had settled into the grooves of my fingerprint, marking me. She had taken my parents' legacy. She had taken everything. But she had made a mistake. She thought she had taken my power. I reached under the pillow and pulled out the burner phone. My hand wasn't shaking anymore. My mind was clear as a bell. "It is done, Ellie," I said when she answered. "Did she take the house?" Elena asked. "Yes," I said. "She used my thumbprint." "Good," Elena said, her voice dark. "That is the final nail. That is fraud, Zeke. Elder abuse. Coercion. We have it all on the hidden camera in the light fixture." She paused. "I sent the tailor to your room. He is waiting outside with security. Are you ready to get up?" I sat up in bed. I swung my legs over the side. The cast was heavy, but the pain was manageable now. The fire in my gut was fueling me. "I am ready," I said. "Then get dressed, Mr. Freeman," Elena said. "Your carriage awaits, and Zeke, wear the blue tie. It matches your eyes when you are angry." I hung up the phone. I looked at the door. Vivian thought I was a vegetable. She thought I was a phantasm in a hospital bed. She was about to find out that I was the storm that was coming to wash her away. The suit Elena had commissioned for me was not just clothing, it was armor. It was a midnight blue three-piece masterpiece cut from Italian silk that felt lighter than air but stronger than steel. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in the private dressing room backstage at the convention center, adjusting the tie that matched my eyes. For the first time in weeks, the man looking back at me wasn't a victim. He wasn't a janitor. He wasn't a vegetable rotting in a hospital bed. He was Isaiah Freeman, and he was ready for war. On the wall, a massive, flat-screen monitor broadcasted the live feed from the ballroom just a few hundred feet away. The 30th anniversary gala of St. Jude's Hospital was in full swing, and it was a spectacle of excess that made the previous dinner look like a backyard barbecue. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling like frozen tears. Tables were laden with food that cost more than my annual salary used to be. And in the center of it all, holding court like a queen on her coronation day, was my wife. Vivian looked magnificent, I had to admit. She was wearing a silver gown that shimmered under the stage lights, diamonds sparkling at her throat and ears. But I knew those diamonds. I knew the credit card debt she had racked up to buy them. I knew the lies she had told to maintain that shine. I turned up the volume on the monitor. Vivian was standing in front of a phalanx of reporters near the red carpet entrance. She was dabbing at her dry eyes with a lace handkerchief, putting on the performance of a lifetime. "It has been a devastating week," she told a reporter from Channel 5, her voice trembling with practiced sorrow. "My husband, Isaiah. He has always been my rock, but his decline has been so rapid. To see the man you love fade away, to see him lose his mind to dementia so suddenly, it breaks my heart." The reporter nodded sympathetically, shoving the microphone closer. "And yet, you are here tonight, Mrs. Freeman. That shows incredible dedication." Vivian sighed, a sound of brave suffering. "I have to be here. The hospital is my life. Isaiah would want me to carry on. I am doing this for him. I am dedicating tonight's success to my poor, confused husband, who is resting peacefully in our VIP wing under the best care possible." I clenched my fists. Resting peacefully. She meant drugged and abandoned. She meant erased. She was using my tragedy, a tragedy she had engineered to paint herself as a saint. She was climbing to the top of the social ladder on the rungs of my broken back. Elena stepped up beside me, handing me a glass of water. She was wearing a sharp white tuxedo suit, looking like an avenging angel. "She is good," Elena murmured, watching the screen. "I almost believe her myself. She is a monster," I said, my voice cold. "She is a house of cards," Zeke, Elena corrected. "And the wind is picking up." The camera panned away from Vivian to the VIP bar area. There, holding court with a group of young, wealthy socialites, were Marcus and Chloe. My son looked dashing in a rented tuxedo, but his eyes were glassy with champagne. Chloe was wearing a dress that left little to the imagination, clutching a designer clutch that I knew cost $3,000 because I had seen the charge on the stolen bank statement. They weren't looking sad. They weren't mourning the decline of the family patriarch. They were celebrating. "Hey, Marcus. Nice ride outside," one of his friends said, clinking his glass against Marcus's. "Is that the new Cayenne Turbo?" Marcus grinned, puffing out his chest. "Yeah, just picked it up. Custom interior. 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. It is a beast. Must be nice to get a bonus like that." The friend laughed. Chloe giggled, leaning into Marcus. "Oh, it wasn't a bonus. It was, let's call it a family investment. Marcus's dad finally decided to liquidate some assets. You know how old people are. They hold on to money they can't use. We figured we would put it to better use while we are still young enough to enjoy it. I felt a vein throb in my temple. Liquidate assets. That was their euphemism for theft. That was how they justified stealing 40 years of my life to buy a car that would depreciate by half the moment they drove it off the lot. And the house, another woman asked. I heard you guys are selling the old cottage on Elm Street. Sold, Chloe declared triumphantly. Signed the papers this morning. Well, Isaiah signed them. We just helped him hold the pen. The group erupted in laughter. It was a cruel, ugly sound. Helped him hold the pen, Marcus chimed in, slurring slightly. Dad is pretty much a vegetable now. Lights are on, but nobody is home. Honestly, it is a relief. Now we can finally move on without having to worry about him wandering off or embarrassing us. He is going to a nice facility tomorrow. Out of sight, out of mind. Out of sight, out of mind. My own son. The boy I taught to fish. The boy I stayed up with when he had the flu. He was talking about me like I was a sick dog they were putting down. I looked at Elena. Her jaw was set hard. Are you ready? She asked. I smoothed the lapel of my jacket. I thought about the basement. I thought about the vodka burning my eyes. I thought about the blue ink on my thumb. I have never been more ready in my life, I said. On the screen, the lights in the ballroom dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd. The music swelled, a dramatic orchestral piece that signaled the beginning of the main event. A spotlight hit the center stage. Elena walked out from the wings on the screen, and simultaneously I watched her walk away from me down the hallway to the stage entrance. It was surreal, seeing her in two places at once, the architect of my salvation. She took the podium. The applause was thunderous. Vivian was sitting at the front table, right in the center. She was beaming, clapping her hands gracefully, looking around the room to make sure everyone saw her proximity to power. She looked like the cat that had not only eaten the canary, but had also inherited the birdcage. Thank you, Elena said, her voice amplified through the massive speakers. Thank you all for coming to celebrate 30 years of St. Jude's. This hospital has a legacy of healing, of care, and of community. But a hospital is only as strong as its leadership. Vivian straightened in her chair. She smoothed her dress. She took a sip of water. This was it. She knew what was coming. She had spent 10 years clawing her way to this moment. She had sacrificed her marriage, her integrity, and her soul for this announcement. I recently acquired this network because I believe in its potential. Elena continued. But I also believe that true leadership requires more than just administrative skill. It requires character. It requires a moral compass that points true north even when the storm is raging. Vivian nodded solemnly as if Elena were speaking directly to her soul. She nudged the person next to her, a prominent senator, and whispered something. Probably I am so humbled. Tonight, Elena said, her voice rising, I am honored to announce a restructuring of the hospital's governance. I have decided to appoint a new chairman of the board, a person who will have absolute authority over all administrative, financial, and ethical decisions for the entire network. A person who embodies the spirit of sacrifice and service that St. Jude stands for. Vivian placed her hands on the table, bracing herself to stand. Her face was a mask of ecstatic anticipation. She was already composing her acceptance speech in her head. She was thinking about the office she would redecorate. She was thinking about the power she would wield. This person, Elena went on, has given more to this hospital than anyone knows. He has worked in the shadows. He has supported the staff when they were breaking. He has given his own resources to save the careers of others. He is a man of quiet dignity and unbreakable strength. Vivian frowned slightly. She probably thought Elena was just using the generic pronoun. Or maybe she thought Elena was referring to Dr. Finch. But no, Finch was a follower, not a leader. Vivian dismissed the thought. It had to be her. Who else was there? Ladies and gentlemen, Elena said, opening the red folder on the podium. Please stand and welcome the new chairman of the board of St. Jude's Hospital. Vivian stood up. She didn't wait for the name. She just stood up. She couldn't help herself. The arrogance was a physical force pushing her out of her chair. She turned to the crowd, a modest, surprised smile plastered on her face, ready to wave, ready to walk up the stairs and claim her crown. She was the only person standing in the front row. The spotlight swept across the room, searching. Please welcome, Elena's voice boomed, Mr. Isaiah Freeman. The name hung in the air. Vivian froze. Her smile didn't drop. It shattered. She looked like a statue that had been struck by lightning. She stood there half-turned toward the audience, her hand half-raised in a wave that was now a grotesque gesture of confusion. The room went silent. Confusion rippled through the crowd. Isaiah Freeman. The husband. The sick husband. The janitor. Marcus dropped his champagne glass. Chloe choked on her drink. Vivian turned slowly to look at Elena on stage. Her eyes were wide, terrified, pleading. She mouthed the word, "No." But Elena wasn't looking at her. She was looking at the massive double doors at the back of the room. She extended her hand. "Mr. Freeman, if you would please join us." The spotlight swung away from Vivian, leaving her in the semi-darkness of the floor, and hit the doors. The doors swung open. I stepped into the light. I wasn't limping. I wasn't using a cane. I wasn't wearing the stained clothes of a confused old man. I was walking with the stride of a man who owns the ground he steps on. The Italian suit fit me like a second skin. My head was high, my eyes were clear. A gasp went through the room. It started as a ripple and became a wave. Is that him? Is that the invalid? He looks powerful. I walked down the center aisle. I walked past the tables of the doctors who had ignored me for years. I walked past the administrators who had looked through me when I was mopping their floors. I walked past Marcus and Chloe. I stopped for a microsecond at their table. I looked down at them. Marcus was pale, his mouth hanging open. Chloe looked like she had seen a ghost. "Hello, son," I said, my voice strong and deep. "Nice car." I kept walking. I reached the front of the room. Vivian was still standing there, paralyzed. She was blocking my path to the stairs. She looked at me, her eyes darting up and down my suit, my face, my steady hands. "Isaiah," she whispered, her voice a strangled squeak. "What? How? You are sick. You are—" I stopped right in front of her. I was taller than her. I had always been taller, but I had slumped for so long she had forgotten. Now I stood at my full height. I leaned in close so only she could hear. "I am not sick, Vivian," I said. "I am just finished being your victim." Then I stepped around her. I didn't push her. I didn't touch her. I just bypassed her like she was a piece of furniture in the wrong place. I walked up the stairs to the stage. Elena was waiting. She was beaming. She handed me the microphone. I took it. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw the confusion, the curiosity, the shock. And right in the center, I saw my wife standing alone, looking small and terrified, as the realization of what was happening began to crush her. I took a deep breath. It tasted like victory. "Good evening," I said. "My name is Isaiah Freeman, and we have a lot to talk about." The silence in the ballroom was absolute, a vacuum that sucked the air out of the room. Elena Vance stood at the podium, her hand extended toward the wings of the stage, her finger pointing not at a ghost but at a revolution. She didn't repeat herself. She didn't have to. The name she had spoken was still hanging in the air, heavy and impossible. Mr. Isaiah Freeman. I stood in the shadows of the stage entrance for a heartbeat longer than necessary. I wanted to let the name sink in. I wanted Vivian to taste it. For 40 years, my name had been a synonym for inconvenience, for embarrassment, for the man who fixed the leaks and took out the trash. Tonight, Elena had turned it into a title. "Please welcome," Elena said. Again, her voice softening with genuine affection, the new chairman of the board. I stepped out. The lights hit me blindingly bright, but I didn't blink. I walked onto the stage, not as the man who had slept in a basement, but as the man who had survived it. The Italian suit hugged my shoulders, the midnight blue fabric shimmering under the stage lights. I wasn't using a cane. I wasn't dragging my leg. I was walking with the steady, powerful stride of a man who had carried the weight of a family on his back for decades and had finally decided to put it down. A collective gasp ripped through the audience. It was a physical sound, a wave of shock that rolled from the front row to the back. I saw the faces of the doctors who had walked past me in the hallways for 30 years without ever learning my name. I saw the administrators who had laughed at Vivian's jokes about her simple husband. Their jaws were on the floor. They weren't looking at a janitor. They were looking at power. But the only face that mattered was Vivian's. She was standing just below the stage, right where I had left her. She looked small. She looked shattered. Her hands were gripping the edge of the stage as if the floor were tilting beneath her feet. Her mouth was opening and closing, forming words that had no sound. She was staring at my leg, the leg that was supposed to be broken, the leg that was supposed to anchor me to a hospital bed in a state facility. I walked to the center of the stage and stood next to Elena. I looked down at my wife. Our eyes locked. For the first time in our marriage, she had to look up to me. Isaiah, she mouthed, her eyes wide with terror and confusion. You can walk. I didn't answer her. I didn't even nod. I simply turned my gaze to the audience, letting my silence crush her. Elena stepped back, giving me the podium, giving me the room. "Thank you, Mrs. Vance," I said into the microphone. My voice was deep, steady, and resonated through the massive speakers filling every corner of the hall. The sound of my voice seemed to snap Marcus out of his trance. I saw him at the VIP table halfway back. He had stood up, knocking his chair over. He was clutching Chloe's arm, looking at me with a mixture of fear and awe. Chloe was pale, her hand covering her mouth, her eyes darting between me and the exit signs. They knew. In that second, they knew the game was over. I looked out at the sea of tuxedos and gowns. For 30 years, I have walked the halls of St. Jude's, I began. I have cleaned your floors. I have fixed your lights. I have ensured that the heat worked in the winter and the air worked in the summer. I have been invisible. I paused. The room was so quiet you could hear the ice melting in the champagne buckets. But invisibility has its advantages, I continued. When you are invisible, people don't hide things from you. They speak freely. They show you who they really are. I have seen the dedication of the nurses who stay past their shifts. I have seen the brilliance of the surgeons, but I have also seen the rot. I looked down at Vivian. She was trembling now, her face a mask of panic. She tried to step onto the stairs to come up to me, but a security guard stepped in her path, blocking her way. I have seen how leadership can become tyranny, I said, my voice hardening. I have seen how ambition can replace compassion. And I have learned that a hospital cannot heal others if its heart is diseased. Vivian let out a strangled cry. "Stop it," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "He is sick. He is confused. Don't listen to him. He has dementia." The crowd murmured, uncomfortable. They looked from the powerful man on stage to the hysterical woman on the floor. Elena stepped forward to the microphone. "Mrs. Freeman claims her husband is confused," Elena said, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "She claims he is incapacitated. She claims he is a burden that needs to be managed." Elena looked at me, then back at Vivian. "But we believe in evidence at St. Jude's. We believe in the truth. And tonight we are going to show you the truth about how the former administration treats its most vulnerable. Former administration." The words hit Vivian like a physical blow. She staggered back. Elena pressed a button on the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, please direct your attention to the main screen." The massive LED screen behind us, which had been displaying the hospital logo, went black. Then a timestamp appeared. 3 days ago. 6:00 a.m. The image was grainy but clear. It was black and white, shot from a high angle. It was the foyer of my house. The audience went deadly silent. On the screen, I was standing at the bottom of the stairs holding my suitcase. Chloe appeared at the top. The audio was crisp. Every word echoed through the ballroom. "Give it to me!" Chloe's voice shrieked from the speakers. The audience watched horrified as Chloe grabbed the suitcase. They watched the struggle. And then they watched in high definition as Chloe placed both hands on my chest and shoved. A collective gasp of horror filled the room. It was a sound of pure shock. On the screen, my body flew backward. The sickening crunch of my leg breaking was amplified by the sound system. It sounded like a gunshot. "Oh my God," someone whispered in the front row. But the video didn't stop. It cut to a new angle. The living room. I was lying on the floor, curled in agony. Vivian was standing over me. "We wait 20 minutes. Vivian's voice boomed through the hall. The cruelty of it was naked. The crowd watched as my wife, the woman who had just given interviews about her devotion, checked her watch while her husband writhed in pain. "Get the vodka," she ordered on the screen. "No," Vivian screamed in the ballroom, covering her ears. "Turn it off. It is fake. Deep fake." But no one was looking at her. They were glued to the screen. They watched Chloe splash the alcohol on me. They watched them rehearse the lie. They watched Marcus stand there and do nothing. Then the video cut to the hospital room. It was the footage from the hidden camera in the light fixture. It showed Vivian pressing my thumb onto the ink pad. It showed her smiling as she stole my parents' house. "You lose Isaiah," the Vivian on the screen whispered. The screen went black. For 10 seconds there was no sound in the ballroom. No one moved. No one breathed. The horror of what they had just witnessed was too big to process immediately. They had just watched the attempted murder and systematic abuse of a man by his own family, orchestrated by the woman they had admired for years. Then the dam broke. A low murmur of anger started in the back of the room and swept forward like a tidal wave. People stood up, turning their backs on the stage to look at Vivian with expressions of absolute disgust. Vivian stood alone in the center of the floor. The circle of people around her had widened as if she were contagious. She looked around, her eyes wild, searching for an ally, searching for someone who would believe her lie. But there were no allies left. She looked up at me. I was still standing at the podium, looking down at her. I wasn't smiling. I wasn't gloating. I was just watching her fall. "It is a lie," Vivian screamed, her voice shrill and desperate. "He set me up. He is the abuser. He is mentally ill. Can't you see? He tricked me." I leaned into the microphone. "I am not the one who pushed Vivian," I said calmly. "And I am not the one who waited 20 minutes to call for help." Elena stepped up beside me. "Security," she said into the mic. "Please escort Mrs. Freeman and her family out of the building, and please ensure they do not leave the premises. The police are waiting in the lobby." At the mention of police, panic took over. Marcus tried to run. He shoved past a waiter knocking over a tray of drinks, heading for the side exit. But 2 large security guards intercepted him before he got 5 feet. They grabbed him by the arms. "Get off me!" Marcus yelled. "I didn't do anything. It was her. It was all her." He pointed at Chloe. Chloe was sobbing, clutching her designer bag, looking like a trapped animal. "I didn't mean to." He slipped. "The video is edited." Vivian didn't run. She froze. She looked at the security guards approaching her. She looked at the crowd looking at her with hatred. She looked at the stage where I stood, the husband she had tried to erase, now the man holding the gavel of her judgment. She straightened her spine. She tried to salvage one last shred of dignity. "You can't do this to me," she hissed at the guards. "I am the director." "Not anymore, ma'am," the guard said, taking her arm firmly. "You are trespassing." As they dragged her away, kicking and screaming about her rights and her reputation, I felt a heavy weight lift off my chest. The cast on my leg, concealed under the wide leg of my trousers, throbbed, but the pain was distant. I looked at Elena. She had tears in her eyes, but she was smiling. "Mr. Chairman," she said softly, "the floor is yours." I looked back at the audience. The shock was fading, replaced by a waiting silence. They wanted to know what happened next. They wanted to know who I was. I cleared my throat. "My name is Isaiah Freeman," I said, "and tonight St. Jude's starts over. We are going to clean this house, and I know exactly where the dirt is hidden." The ballroom was a cauldron of noise, a mix of gasps, whispers, and the shattering of glass as shaky hands dropped expensive flutes of champagne. But Elena wasn't finished. She stood next to me, her face illuminated by the glow of the massive LED screen behind us, and raised her hand for silence. The room obeyed instantly. They were terrified of what might come next. "We have seen the violence," Elena said, her voice cutting through the tension like a razor. "We have seen the physical abuse, but the rot in this family goes deeper than a push down the stairs. It goes to the very heart of why they did it. Greed." She clicked the remote in her hand. The screen flickered and changed. This time the timestamp was from 5 days ago. The angle was different. It was the camera hidden in the smoke detector in the kitchen. The audience watched in high definition as Marcus sat at the kitchen table with his laptop. Vivian stood behind him, a glass of wine in her hand. The audio was crystal clear. "Do it," Marcus, the Vivian on the screen, commanded. "Transfer the whole amount." "He won't notice. He never checks the statements." I saw Marcus on the screen typing furiously. I saw the smirk on his face. $150,000, the digital Marcus said, laughing. "That is the Porsche mom. That is the down payment on the condo. Goodbye, retirement fund." The ballroom erupted. It wasn't just shock anymore. It was disgust. A low, angry rumble moved through the crowd. These were wealthy people. They understood money. But more than that, they understood theft. To steal a man's life savings, a man who had worked as a janitor, was a sin that even their flexible morals couldn't stomach. The video cut again. Now it was the living room moments after I had fallen. The camera zoomed in on my face, twisted in agony. It showed me reaching out a hand for help, and then it showed Vivian checking her watch. 20 minutes, the on-screen Vivian said coldly. Let him marinate. The crowd groaned. Someone in the back shouted, "That is sick." I looked down at my wife. She was standing in the center of the room, surrounded by a widening circle of empty space. Her face was a mask of sheer terror. She looked at the screen, then at the people glaring at her, and I saw the moment her reality fractured. She couldn't deny it. It was her face, her voice, her cruelty projected 20 feet high for the world to see. Then the doors at the back of the room swung open with a heavy, ominous thud. This time, it wasn't a guest. It wasn't a waiter. It was the police. 6 officers marched into the ballroom, their faces grim, their hands resting on their belts. They moved with a purpose that silenced the room completely. They weren't there to ask questions. They were there to take out the trash. They headed straight for the VIP table where Marcus and Chloe were trying to shrink into their chairs. Marcus Freeman, one of the officers, asked, his voice booming. "Chloe Freeman." Marcus tried to stand up, his legs shaking so badly he knocked over his chair. I didn't... It was alone," he stammered, pointing at the screen. "That video is out of context." "You have the right to remain silent," the officer said, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. The metal clicked a sharp final sound that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. Chloe started to scream. "No, you can't arrest me. I am pregnant. I didn't mean to push him. It was an accident." The crowd watched, mesmerized, as my son and daughter-in-law were cuffed and led away, weeping and begging. Then the officers turned toward Vivian. She stood alone. She looked at the police, then she looked up at me. Her eyes were wild, darting back and forth like a trapped animal. She realized there was no escape. She realized the narrative she had carefully constructed for 30 years was burning to ash around her. And she snapped. "No!" She screamed, her voice shrill and piercing. "This is a setup." She pointed a trembling finger at the screen. "That video is fake. It is AI. He made it up. He is trying to frame me." She looked around at the guests, grabbing the arm of a terrified donor. "You know me. I am the director. I am Vivian Freeman. That man on stage is my husband, but he is sick. He is crazy. Look at him. He has dementia. He doesn't know what he is doing." She ran toward the stage, her heels clicking frantically on the marble. She stopped at the bottom of the stairs, looking up at me with eyes full of hate and desperation. "Tell them, Isaiah. Tell them you are confused. Tell them you are having an episode. You are my husband. You owe me." The room held its breath. Everyone looked at me. They were waiting to see if the powerful man in the Italian suit would crumble. They were waiting to see if the old janitor would bow his head one last time. I walked to the edge of the stage. I looked down at her. I saw the woman I had married. I saw the woman I had loved. And I saw the monster she had become. I lifted the microphone to my lips. My hand was steady. My heart was calm. "I am not crazy, Vivian," I said. My voice was soft, but in the silence of the ballroom it sounded like thunder. I looked her dead in the eye. "I am not confused. I am not senile. And I am certainly not having an episode." I took a step closer to the edge looming over her. "I was blind," I continued. "That part is true. I was blind for 40 years. I was blind because I loved you. I was blind because I thought that if I worked hard enough, if I sacrificed enough, if I gave you everything I had, eventually you would look at me and see a man." I paused. I let the words sink in. I thought that if I stayed in the shadows, you would shine brighter. I thought that was my job as a husband, to lift you up, to carry the load so you didn't have to. I pointed at the screen where the frozen image of her checking her watch loomed over us. But I wasn't blind because I was sick, Vivian. I was blind because I trusted you. I lowered my hand. But then your daughter-in-law pushed me down the stairs. And when I hit that floor, when I felt my bones snap, something else snapped too. I leaned forward. That push woke me up, Vivian. It woke me up from a 40-year sleep. And when I opened my eyes, I didn't see a wife. I saw a parasite. Vivian gasped. She took a step back, her hand flying to her mouth. "Officer," I said, straightening up and addressing the policemen who were now approaching the stage. "Please remove this woman from my hospital. She is trespassing, and she has a date with a judge." "No!" Vivian shrieked as the officers grabbed her arms. "You can't do this. I am the CEO. I am St. Jude's Isaiah. Tell them I turned my back on her." I walked over to Elena, who was watching me with tears of pride in her eyes. I didn't look back as they dragged my wife away. I didn't look back as she screamed my name, begging, cursing, and crying. I listened to the sound of the double doors closing behind her, and then there was silence. It was a clean silence, a silence that smelled of truth. I looked out at the audience. They were stunned, they were shaken, but they were also looking at me with something I hadn't seen in a long time. Respect. I adjusted my tie. I looked at Elena. "Shall we continue the meeting?" "Mrs. Vance?" I asked. She smiled. "Yes, Mr. Chairman. I believe we have a hospital to run." "Wait," I said, my voice cutting through the chaos of the ballroom like a knife. The police officers paused, holding Vivian by her arms near the edge of the stage. She was panting, her hair disheveled, her eyes darting around the room like a trapped rat looking for a sewer. She looked up at me, hope flickering in her eyes for a split second. Maybe she thought I was going to show mercy. Maybe she thought the old Isaiah, the husband who had spent 40 years apologizing for existing, was going to step in and save her. But the old Isaiah was dead. He had died at the bottom of the stairs. "I am not finished," I said calmly. I signaled to the wings of the stage. A man in a charcoal gray suit stepped out. It was Mr. Sterling, the head of the legal team Elena had assembled. He walked across the stage with the precision of a predator, holding a thick blue folder in his hands. Vivian frowned, confusion warring with her panic. "Who is this? What is this?" Mr. Sterling stopped in front of her. He didn't look at her with pity. He looked at her like she was a math problem he had already solved. "Mrs. Freeman," he said, his voice amplified by the microphone clipped to his lapel so every single person in the room could hear. "I am Isaiah's attorney, and you have been served." He thrust the blue folder into her hands. Her fingers, slick with sweat, fumbled with it before she managed to grip it. "What is this?" she screeched, looking from the folder to me. I walked to the edge of the stage, looking down at her from my vantage point of power. "It is a divorce decree, Vivian," I said. The room erupted in whispers again. Vivian stared at the papers. She laughed. It was a jagged, hysterical sound that grated on the ears. "Divorce," she cackled, looking around at the crowd as if inviting them to share the joke. "You want to divorce me, you? The man who doesn't have a penny to his name, the man whose clothes I bought, the man who lived in my basement." She looked back at me, her eyes gleaming with a twisted manic triumph. "Go ahead, Isaiah. Divorce me. Do you know how the law works? We have been married for 40 years. 40 years. That means everything we own is community property. The house, the cars, the investments, my pension. Everything is split down the middle." She straightened up, shaking off the officer's grip for a moment, regaining her arrogance, even as the handcuffs dug into her wrists. "You think you are destroying me?" she spat. "You are doing me a favor. Half of my estate is still millions of dollars. I will walk out of here. I will hire the best criminal defense lawyers money can buy with your half of the money, and I will be back on top in a year. You are just handing me my retirement fund, you old fool. I will still be rich. And you will just be the ex-husband of a wealthy woman." I watched her rant. I watched her cling to her delusion like a drowning woman clinging to a stone. She truly believed that money was her shield. She truly believed that the wealth she had flaunted for decades was hers to keep. I looked at Mr. Sterling. He nodded. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a second document. This one was thicker. It was bound in red tape. Mrs. Freeman Sterling said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming grave and final. "You are operating under a significant misconception." Vivian rolled her eyes. "Oh, spare me the legal jargon. I know my rights. 50-50. That is the law. That law applies to marital assets acquired legally," Sterling corrected. "However, it does not apply to the proceeds of crime." Vivian froze. The color that had returned to her cheeks drained away, instantly leaving her looking gray and old. "Crime," she whispered. Elena stepped forward, standing beside me. She held a remote control in her hand. "We didn't just look at the cameras in your house," Elena said. "When I bought this hospital network this morning, the first thing I did was order a forensic audit of the books, specifically the discretionary funds managed by the director's office." Elena clicked the remote. The massive screen behind us changed. Gone was the video of my fall. In its place was a spreadsheet, a complex, detailed web of numbers, dates, and transfers. Vivian's knees buckled. The officers had to hold her up. "We found the shell companies," Elena continued, pointing at the screen. "Global Medical Supplies, Freeman Consulting, Elite Care Solutions, all registered to a P.O. box in the Cayman Islands, all controlled by you. I looked at the screen. I saw transfers of $50,000, $100,000, $200,000 monthly for 10 years. You didn't build your wealth. Vivian, I said, my voice heavy with disgust, you stole it. You stole it from the hospital. You stole it from the patients. You stole it from the budget meant for new equipment, for nurses' raises, for charity care. No, Vivian moaned, shaking her head weakly. That is creative accounting. It is standard practice. It is embezzlement. Sterling interrupted, his voice booming like a gavel. Grand larceny, fraud, money laundering. He opened the red-bound document and held it up for the room to see. This is a freezing order granted by the federal court an hour ago. Every asset in your name has been seized. The house, the cars, the jewelry you are wearing right now, the offshore accounts. All of it. It is all frozen pending the criminal investigation. Vivian stared at the paper. She looked down at the diamond necklace around her throat. She touched it, her fingers trembling. But my pension, she whispered. My 40 years, forfeited, Sterling said. Under the terms of your employment contract, any employee found guilty of theft forfeits all benefits. But it gets worse, Mrs. Freeman. He turned a page. Our audit shows a total misappropriation of funds amounting to $4.8 million. With interest and penalties, you currently owe St. Jude's Hospital slightly over $5 million. He closed the folder with a snap. So, to answer your question about the divorce settlement, there are no assets to split. There is only debt. You are not walking out of here a rich woman. You are walking out of here destitute. You have nothing. You own nothing. You are nothing. The silence that followed was terrifying. It was the sound of a life being completely, utterly erased. Vivian looked at me. Her eyes were empty holes. The arrogance was gone. The rage was gone. All that was left was a terrifying void. Isaiah, she whimpered. Her voice was so small I almost didn't hear it. Isaiah, please. You have money now. Elena gave you money. Help me. We are married. You can't let them take everything. I am your wife. I looked at the woman who had thrown my clothes in the mud. I looked at the woman who had watched me writhe in pain for 20 minutes because she wanted to secure her promotion. I looked at the woman who had tried to steal my parents' cottage. I am not your husband, Vivian, I said. I was your servant. I was your punching bag. I was your scapegoat, but I was never your husband. Because a husband is a partner and you don't have partners. You only have victims. I took off my wedding ring. It was a simple gold band scratched and worn from years of manual labor. I held it up. I pawned my grandfather's watch to buy your engagement ring, I told her. I worked 3 jobs to buy our first house. I gave you everything I had every single day for 40 years, and you repaid me by trying to bury me. I threw the ring. It hit the floor near her feet with a tiny metallic ping. Keep it, I said. It is the only gold you have left. Officers, Sterling said. She is all yours. Vivian screamed. It wasn't a word. It was a raw animal sound of total despair. Her legs gave out completely, and she was dragged dead weight across the beautiful marble floor of the ballroom she thought she would rule. Her heels scraped against the stone, leaving black marks. Her silver gown bunched up around her waist. She reached out, clawing at the air, begging, sobbing, shrieking my name. Isaiah, no, please, I am sorry. I will do anything. Don't let them take me. I watched her go. I watched the heavy double doors swing shut behind her wailing form, cutting off her screams. The room was still. People were pale, shaken. They had come for a party and had witnessed an execution. I looked down at my hands. They were steady. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't joy. It was lighter than that. It was freedom. I turned to Elena. She was watching me, a sad smile on her face. Are you okay, Mr. Chairman? She asked softly. I adjusted my cuffs. I looked out at the silent ballroom, at the faces of the people who were now looking at me with fear and respect. I am fine, Ellie, I said. I looked at Marcus and Chloe's empty chairs. I looked at the spot where Vivian had stood. The trash has been taken out, I said. Now let's get to work. We have a hospital to fix. The heavy double doors swallowed Vivian's screams, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than the noise. The air in the ballroom was still vibrating with the violence of her exit. I stood on the stage, my chest heaving slightly, feeling the ghost of the wedding ring I had thrown away still burning on my finger. But the surgery wasn't finished. The tumor had been removed, but the infection still lingered at table 12. I turned my gaze to the VIP section. The circle of isolation around Marcus and Chloe had grown. They sat frozen like statues carved from ice, and fear staring at the empty doorway where the matriarch of their conspiracy had just vanished. They looked at each other, and for the first time I saw the bond between them snap. Without Vivian's money and power holding them together, there was no love, only mutual liability. "Officer," I said into the microphone, my voice calm and resonant, "we have 2 more guests who have overstayed their welcome." The police officers, the ones who hadn't dragged Vivian away, turned their attention to the table. They marched toward Chloe first. She was the one who had put her hands on me. She was the one who had shoved a 74-year-old man down a flight of stairs because she wanted a gym. Chloe saw them coming. She stood up, knocking her chair backward. She clutched her $3,000 handbag to her chest as if it were a shield. "No," she whimpered, backing away until she bumped into a waiter. "Don't touch me. I am pregnant. You can't arrest a pregnant woman. You are under arrest for aggravated assault, intentional infliction of bodily injury to an elderly person, and conspiracy to commit fraud," the officer said, his voice flat and bored. He reached for her wrist. Chloe shrieked. It was a high, piercing sound that made the guests flinch. She tried to pull away, her fingernails scraping against the officer's uniform. "It wasn't my fault," she screamed, her eyes wild. She pointed a shaking finger at Marcus, who was sitting with his head in his hands. "It was him. It was Marcus. He made me do it. He told me to get rid of him." Marcus looked up, his face pale with shock. "Chloe, what are you saying?" "He said his father was a waste of space," Chloe yelled, looking desperately at the police, at the crowd, at anyone who would listen. "He said he wanted the basement for a wine cellar. He told me to be aggressive. I was just doing what my husband told me. I was scared of him. He forced me." I watched them from the stage. I watched the woman who had laughed while I lay in agony turn on the man she had bought a Porsche for. It was pathetic. It was inevitable. Rats always eat each other when the ship goes down. The officer didn't care about her excuses. He spun her around and slammed the handcuffs onto her wrists. The click of the metal was the only sound in the room. "You have the right to remain silent," the officer droned. "I am not silent," Chloe screamed as they began to drag her toward the exit. "I am a victim. Marcus is the monster. Look at him." He stood there and watched. He did nothing. He wanted the money for the car. Her heels dragged across the floor, leaving scuff marks on the marble exactly as Vivian's had. She passed the table where her friends were sitting, the same friends she had laughed with 10 minutes ago about my senility. They looked away, studying their manicures, pretending they didn't know her. As Chloe disappeared through the doors, wailing about her innocence, the room turned its attention to the last man standing, Marcus. He was alone. His mother was gone. His wife was gone. His reputation was ash. He sat in the ruin of his life, wearing a rented tuxedo that suddenly looked too big for him. "Officer, take him," Sterling said from beside me. 2 officers approached Marcus. He didn't run. He didn't fight. He stood up slowly, his legs shaking so hard I could see the fabric of his trousers trembling. He looked at the handcuffs on the officer's belt. Then he looked up at the stage. He looked at me. "Wait," Marcus said, his voice cracking. "Please, just 1 second." He stepped away from the table. The officers tensed hands on their tasers, but Marcus didn't move toward the exit. He moved toward me. He walked down the center aisle, the same path I had taken minutes before. But where I had walked with dignity, he walked with the shuffle of a condemned man. He reached the bottom of the stairs and stopped. He looked up at me, tears streaming down his face, ruining his spray tan. And then he did something I never thought I would see my son do. He dropped to his knees. He fell to the hard floor with a thud, clasping his hands together in a gesture of prayer. He looked like a child who had broken a window and was terrified of the belt. "Dad," he sobbed, the sound echoing through the microphone that was still live. "Dad, please. Tell them to stop. Tell them it was a mistake." I looked down at him. I remembered holding him when he was a baby, promising to protect him from the world. I remembered teaching him to tie his shoes. I remembered his graduation, how proud I was, even though Vivian wouldn't let me take a picture with him because my suit was old. "I am your son." Marcus wept, crawling forward until his hands touched the edge of the stage. "I am your flesh and blood. I am the only child you have. You can't let them take me to jail. I am your boy." The room waited. They wanted to see if the father would break. They wanted to see if blood was thicker than water. I stepped closer to the edge. I looked at the top of his head. My son. I asked, my voice soft but amplified to a boom by the speakers. Marcus looked up, hope flooding his tear-stained face. Yes, Dad. Your son. I made a mistake. I was weak. But I am family. I shook my head slowly. You are not my son, Marcus. The hope vanished from his face, replaced by a cold terror. My son would never have watched his father fall down a flight of stairs and checked his watch, I said, my voice rising with the tide of my anger. My son would never have stood in the kitchen and laughed while his wife poured vodka on a broken man. I pointed a finger at him, the judgment final. But above all, Marcus, my son, would never have touched the retirement fund. Marcus flinched as if I had hit him. That money wasn't just paper, Marcus. I continued, my voice trembling with the rage of 40 years of sacrifice. That money was my sweat. That money was my aching back. That money was every vacation I didn't take, every suit I didn't buy, every meal I skipped so you could have braces, so you could have tuition, so you could have a life better than mine. I took a breath, steeling myself. You took 40 years of my life, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that carried the weight of a gravestone. And you traded it for a Porsche. You traded my safety for leather seats. You traded my dignity for 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. I didn't mean to, Marcus stammered. You severed the lifeline, Marcus, I interrupted. You pulled the plug on fatherhood the moment you signed that transfer. You decided that a car was worth more than my life. You decided that my survival was an inconvenience to your luxury. I stood up straighter, adjusting my cufflinks. I don't have a son who is a thief, I declared. I don't have a son who is a coward. The boy I raised died a long time ago. I don't know who you are, but you are trespassing on my stage. Marcus stared at me, his mouth open, realizing there was no mercy coming. There was no last-minute reprieve. He had gambled his father's love against a sports car, and he had lost everything. Officers, I said, turning my back on him. Get this stranger out of my sight. No, Dad, Marcus screamed as the officers hauled him up from his knees. Dad, I am sorry. I will sell the car. I will pay you back. Don't do this. I didn't turn around. I didn't look back. I listened to the click of the handcuffs. I listened to his sobbing pleas as they dragged him down the aisle. I listened to the sound of his shoes scraping against the floor, a desperate, futile resistance. I looked at Elena. She was standing by the podium, her face pale but her eyes shining with a fierce pride. She knew what it cost me to do that. She knew that I had just cut off my own arm to save the body. The doors slammed shut one last time. The room was silent again. The stage was empty of everyone but me and the woman who had saved me. I took a deep breath. The air felt thin, but it was clean. The weight of my family, the burden I had carried for decades, was gone. I was light. I was alone, but I was free. I walked to the podium. I looked out at the stunned crowd, at the employees of the hospital, at the board members. I apologize for the interruption, I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the heartbreak that was bleeding internally. Cleaning house is a messy business, but it is necessary, because you cannot build a future on a foundation of rot. I buttoned my jacket. My name is Isaiah Freeman. I am your new chairman. And from this moment on, things are going to be different. I signaled the conductor in the orchestra pit. Play the music, I said. We have a celebration to finish. As the band struck up a hesitant tune, I walked off the stage. I didn't go to the VIP table. I didn't go to the bar. I walked straight to the exit into the cool night air, leaving the wreckage of my past behind me on the marble floor. 6 months passed. 6 months since the gala. 6 months since the silence in the ballroom was broken by the sound of handcuffs clicking shut. Time had moved differently for me than it had for the family I left behind. For me, the days were filled with board meetings, charity events, and the quiet satisfaction of rebuilding a hospital that had lost its way. But for Vivian, Marcus, and Chloe, time had become a heavy, suffocating weight. I didn't seek out news of them. I didn't need to. In a city like this, when the mighty fall, the echoes are loud. And Elena, with her meticulous nature, ensured that I received a monthly dossier on the progress of justice. The first report detailed Vivian's descent. It was almost poetic in its cruelty. The medical board had stripped her of her license within weeks of the scandal breaking. The forensic audit had left no stone unturned, and the freezing order on her assets was absolute. She was left with nothing but the clothes on her back and a mountain of debt that would take 3 lifetimes to pay off. She tried to find administrative work, but her name was toxic. No hospital would touch her, no clinic would interview her. Finally, desperation forced her hand. The woman who had worn silk and diamonds, the woman who had fired people for having scuffed shoes, took the only job she could find. She became a janitor. I closed my eyes and pictured it. Vivian, in a gray uniform that was 2 sizes too big, pushing a heavy mop bucket across the linoleum floor of a downtown office building. I imagined the smell of industrial bleach stinging her nose, a scent she used to complain about when I came home from work. I imagined her hands, once manicured and soft, now red and chapped from the harsh chemicals. Karma, I realized, wasn't just a concept. It was a mirror. She was living the life she had mocked for 40 years. She was invisible. Executives walked past her without seeing her, their shoes leaving scuff marks on the floor she had just polished. She had to eat her lunch in the basement next to the boiler room, just as I had done 1,000 times. But the physical labor wasn't the worst part for her. It was the arthritis. I knew she had it. She used to complain about a stiffness in her fingers when she signed checks. Now that stiffness had turned into a fire in her joints. Every squeeze of the mop, every bend to pick up a piece of trash must have been agony. And then there was my son. Marcus had not gone to prison, but he had entered a prison of his own making. The plea deal his public defender negotiated kept him out of a cell, but it stripped him of everything else. He had to sell the Porsche. He had to sell the condo. He had to sell his watches, his clothes, his furniture. Every penny went to restitution and legal fees. He was now living in a boarding house on the south side of the city, a place where the walls were paper thin and the sirens never stopped wailing. He rented a room that was smaller than the walk-in closet he used to share with Chloe. He slept on a mattress on the floor because he couldn't afford a bed frame. I wondered if he thought about me when he lay there in the dark. I wondered if he remembered the basement he had banished me to. I wondered if he finally understood what it felt like to be discarded. Chloe at least had a bed, a steel cot in the county jail. She was awaiting trial for assault and elder abuse. Her bail had been set at an amount Marcus couldn't even dream of paying. The last I heard, she spent her days crying and blaming Marcus for her ruin, screaming at him through the plexiglass during visitation hours until he stopped coming. They were broken, scattered, destitute. I sat in my office on the top floor of St. Jude's. It was the same office Vivian used to occupy. I had changed everything. The cold, sterile white furniture was gone, replaced by warm oak and comfortable leather chairs. The pretension was gone. The door was always open. My assistant, a bright young woman named Sarah, knocked gently on the doorframe. "Mr. Freeman," she said, her voice hesitant. "There is a woman here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment." I looked up from the budget report I was reviewing. "Who is it, Sarah?" "She says her name is Vivian," Sarah said, wrinkling her nose slightly. She insisted it was urgent. Security wanted to remove her, but she said she knew you." I took off my reading glasses. I felt a strange calmness settle over me. I had expected this day. I just didn't think it would come so soon. "Let her in, Sarah." Sarah nodded and disappeared. A moment later, the door opened again. Vivian walked in. If I hadn't known it was her, I might not have recognized the woman standing in the doorway. She was stooped, her posture bent as if she were carrying an invisible load. Her hair, once dyed a rich glossy black, was now a dull gray pulled back in a messy bun. She was wearing a cheap raincoat that looked stained, and her shoes were worn-down sneakers. But it was her face that shocked me the most. The arrogance was gone. The sharp predatory look was gone. Her skin was sallow, her eyes sunken and rimmed with red. She looked 20 years older than the woman who had stood on the stage 6 months ago. She stood by the door clutching a plastic bag, looking around the office that used to be hers. She looked at the view of the city she used to command. She looked at the leather chair I was sitting in. "Isaiah," she whispered. Her voice was raspy, broken. "Hello, Vivian," I said. I didn't stand up. I didn't offer her a seat. I just watched her. She took a few tentative steps into the room, limping slightly. She stopped in front of the desk, looking down at her hands. They were swollen, the knuckles enlarged and red. I didn't know if you would see me," she said. "I am a busy man, Vivian," I replied. "What do you want?" She flinched at my tone. It was the tone of a stranger. "I am working." "Isaiah," she began, her words rushing out as if she were afraid I would cut her off. "I found a job. Downtown, cleaning offices. I know, I said. She looked up surprised. You know, I know everything, Vivian. I am the chairman. It is my business to know. She swallowed hard. Then you know how hard it is. She held up her hands, showing me the raw, cracked skin. My hands. Isaiah, the arthritis. It is getting worse. The doctors say I need to rest them. They say if I keep scrubbing floors, I will lose the use of my fingers. But I can't stop. I have debts. The court takes half my check for restitution. I can barely pay for food. I am living in a shelter, Isaiah. A shelter. She started to cry. It wasn't the fake performative crying she used to do for the press. This was the ugly, snotty crying of true despair. I can't do it anymore, she sobbed. My knees, my back, everything hurts. I am 70 years old. I shouldn't be scrubbing toilets. I shouldn't be emptying trash cans. She looked at me, her eyes pleading. Please, Isaiah, I am begging you. I know I was wrong. I know I was terrible. But you have millions now. You have everything. I just need a little help. Just a loan. A few $1,000s. Enough to get a small apartment. Enough to stop working for a few months. She leaned over the desk, her breath smelling of stale coffee. I will pay you back, she promised. I swear. Just, please, don't let me die like this. I am still the mother of your son. We were married for 40 years. Doesn't that count for anything? I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had once been the center of my universe. I looked at the woman who had thrown my clothes in the mud. I looked at the woman who had watched me writhe in pain at the bottom of the stairs and checked her watch. I felt a pang of pity. It was impossible not to. She was a human being in pain. But then I remembered the basement. I remembered the cold dampness. I remembered the feeling of being erased. I opened my desk drawer. Vivian's eyes lit up. She stopped crying. She leaned forward, expecting a checkbook. She expected me to write a number that would solve all her problems. She expected the old Isaiah, the fixer, the man who couldn't bear to see her unhappy. I reached into the drawer, but I didn't pull out a checkbook. I pulled out a small white envelope. I placed it on the desk and slid it toward her. Vivian grabbed it. Her hands were shaking so hard she almost dropped it. She tore it open, her eyes hungry. She pulled out the contents. It wasn't cash. It wasn't a check. It was a business card. And a single crisp $5 bill. She stared at the items in her hand. She looked up at me, confusion clouding her tear-filled eyes. What is this? She whispered. I leaned back in my chair, steepling my fingers. That card is for the City Outreach Center, I said calmly. They offer job training for seniors. They can teach you how to be a receptionist or a greeter, jobs that don't require scrubbing floors. And the money, she asked, her voice trembling with rising anger. $5. I looked at the bill. Do you remember, Vivian? I asked. Do you remember 30 years ago my truck broke down? I needed to get to work. I asked you for bus fare. She blinked, the memory struggling to surface through the fog of her misery. You threw a $5 bill on the floor, I reminded her. You told me that if I couldn't afford a car, I should learn to walk. You told me that dignity has a price and I couldn't afford it. I pointed at the bill in her hand. That is your bus fare, Vivian. It is enough to get you to the outreach center. She stared at me. Her mouth fell open. The shock was absolute. You can't be serious, she stammered. You have $50 million, and you give me $5? I stood up. I walked around the desk. I stood over her just as she had stood over me when I was lying on the floor with a broken leg. I am not giving you money, Vivian, I said, my voice hard as granite. I am giving you something you never gave me, an opportunity. I gestured to the door. You said you shouldn't be scrubbing toilets at 70. Well, I shouldn't have been sleeping in a basement at 74. I shouldn't have been drugged by my own family. I leaned in close. You wanted a life without me, Vivian. You wanted to be independent. You wanted to be the sole architect of your destiny. Congratulations. You have achieved your goal. She looked at the $5 bill. She crumbled it in her fist. You are cruel, she hissed. You are a monster. No, Vivian, I said. I am just a mirror. I am showing you exactly what you invested in. You invested in cruelty, and now you are collecting the dividends. I walked to the door and opened it. "Sarah," I called out. My assistant appeared instantly. "Yes, Mr. Freeman. Please escort this lady out," I said. "And Sarah, make sure she doesn't leave any trash behind. We like to keep the floors clean here." Vivian looked at me one last time. Her eyes were filled with hate, but beneath the hate there was something else. Defeat. She knew she had lost. She knew there were no more moves to play. She turned and walked out. She didn't scream. She didn't make a scene. She just shuffled away, clutching her plastic bag and her $5, a broken woman disappearing into the hallway she used to rule. I watched her go. I felt a deep, profound sadness for the waste of it all. But I didn't feel guilt. I closed the door. I walked back to my desk. I picked up the picture frame that sat there now. It was a photo of me and Elena taken the day I became chairman. We were both smiling. I had work to do. I had a hospital to run, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't cleaning up someone else's mess. I was building something of my own. I sat there watching the woman who had once commanded rooms with a snap of her fingers now trembling before me like a leaf in a gale. Vivian stood on the plush rug of my office, clutching a plastic bag that contained her worldly possessions, her knuckles white and swollen against the cheap material. The silence in the room was heavy, filled not with the tension of a fight, but with the suffocating weight of a tragedy that had run its course. I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time since the night of the gala. I searched inside myself for the anger that had fueled me for so long. I looked for the rage that had burned when she threw my clothes in the mud, the fury I felt when she watched me writhe in pain at the bottom of the stairs. I expected to feel a surge of vindication. I expected to feel the dark, sweet taste of victory watching my tormentor reduced to a beggar. But the anger was gone. In its place was a hollow, aching pity. She looked so small. The power suits were gone, replaced by a stained raincoat that smelled of damp wool and old coffee. The diamonds were gone, replaced by the red, angry inflammation of untreated arthritis. The arrogance that had been her armor was stripped away, leaving only a frightened, aging woman who had gambled everything on greed and lost. She was waiting for me to speak. She was waiting for the check. Her eyes were fixed on the drawer I had opened, a desperate hunger shining in them that made me want to look away. She thought I was going to save her. She thought that despite everything, despite the theft, the abuse, the betrayal, I was still the same Isaiah who couldn't bear to see her suffer. She thought she could bank on the very kindness she had mocked for 40 years. I reached into the drawer. My hand brushed against the cool leather of my checkbook, but I moved past it. I reached for a small white envelope I had prepared days ago, knowing this moment would eventually come. I pulled it out and placed it on the mahogany desk. I slid it across the polished surface until it stopped right in front of her shaking hands. Vivian gasped. The sound was wet and pathetic. She dropped her plastic bag, not caring that her few belongings spilled onto the floor. She lunged for the envelope, her fingers scrabbling against the wood to pick it up. "Oh, Isaiah," she sobbed, tearing at the paper flap. "Thank you. I knew it. I knew you wouldn't let me starve. I knew you still had a heart." She ripped the envelope open, her hands shaking so hard she almost tore the contents. She reached inside expecting a cashier's check. She was probably imagining $5,000, maybe $10,000, enough to get an apartment, enough to get off her knees. She pulled out the contents, a stiff white card, and a single crisp $5 bill. The room went deadly silent. Vivian stared at the items in her hand. She flipped the card over. She looked at the bill. She looked back into the empty envelope, shaking it upside down as if she couldn't believe that was all there was. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice trembling with confusion and a rising, panicked anger. I leaned back in my leather chair, steepling my fingers. I kept my face impassive, my voice steady and low. "Read the card. Vivian." She squinted at the text, her eyes watering. The downtown social outreach center, she read, her voice cracking. Job training, shelter placement, rehabilitation. She looked up at me, her face twisting in disbelief. "A shelter. You are sending me to a homeless shelter. And this," she held up the $5 bill. It fluttered in the air conditioning like a flag of surrender. $5. "Isaiah, are you joking? You are a multimillionaire. You run the biggest hospital network in the state, and you give me $5. I stood up slowly. I walked around the desk, closing the distance between us. I didn't tower over her to intimidate her. I stood there simply to make sure she heard every word. Do you remember 1985, Vivian? I asked softly. She blinked, tears streaming down her sallow cheeks. What? 1985, I repeated. It was a Tuesday. It was raining. My truck had broken down on the highway. I had walked 3 miles in the rain to get home because we couldn't afford a tow truck yet. I was wet. I was cold. And I needed to get to my second job at the warehouse because we needed the overtime to pay for your medical school textbooks. I paused, watching the memory struggle to surface through the fog of her misery. I asked you for bus fare, I said. I asked you for $5 so I wouldn't have to walk another 4 miles in the storm. Vivian's mouth opened slightly. She remembered. I could see it in her eyes. You were sitting at the kitchen table drinking tea, I continued. You laughed at me. You told me that a real man provides, he doesn't beg. You told me that if I couldn't keep a truck running, I deserved to walk. I pointed to the bill in her hand. And then you threw a $5 bill on the floor. You made me pick it up off the linoleum. You said, "Here is your charity, Isaiah. Try not to waste it." Vivian looked down at the bill. Her hand started to shake violently. "That is your bus fare, Vivian," I said, my voice hard as iron. "That is exactly enough to get you from here to the outreach center on 4th Street. It is the same charity you gave me. I am returning the investment." She crumbled the bill in her fist. "You are cruel," she hissed, a spark of her old venom returning. "You are doing this to hurt me. You are enjoying this." "No, Vivian," I said. "I am not enjoying this. It breaks my heart to see you like this. But giving you money won't save you. If I give you $10,000 today, you will spend it on a hotel and clothes, and you will be back here in a month begging for more. You don't know how to survive. You only know how to take." I gestured to the card she was still holding. "I am not giving you money because money was the poison that killed our marriage. I am giving you something you never gave me. I am giving you an opportunity." "Opportunity," she shrieked. "To do what? To live in a shelter with drug addicts, to learn how to be a receptionist at 70 years old, to learn how to respect the broom," I said, cutting her off. She froze. "You said you shouldn't be scrubbing floors," I said, stepping closer. "You said it was beneath you. You said you were too good for manual labor." "Well, I scrubbed floors for 30 years, Vivian. I fixed toilets, I hauled trash, and I did it with dignity because I knew I was building a life for my family." I looked at her hands, the swollen knuckles, the cracked skin. You look at your hands, and you see shame. I look at them, and I see the first honest work you have done in decades. "I am giving you a chance to rebuild your life from the bottom up, just like I did," I told her. "The outreach center isn't just a shelter. They have programs. They can teach you skills. They can help you find a job that doesn't destroy your body, but you have to do the work. You have to be humble. You have to understand that nobody owes you a living." Vivian stared at me. The reality of her situation was crashing down on her. There was no check coming. There was no rescue. There was only the hard, cold pavement of reality. "You hate me," she whispered. I shook my head. "I don't hate you, Vivian. Hate takes energy, and I don't have any left for you. I am indifferent. You are a stranger to me, a stranger who needs to learn that the world doesn't bow to her just because she demands it." I walked to the door of my office and opened it. The hallway was bright and busy, filled with the sounds of a hospital that was finally running the way it should. "Sarah," I called out. My assistant appeared instantly from her desk, looking concerned. "Yes, Mr. Freeman. Please escort Mrs. Freeman to the elevator," I said calmly. I turned back to Vivian. "Take the bus, Vivian. Go to the center. Ask for a woman named Mrs. Higgins. I called her this morning. She is expecting you. She is a tough woman. She won't put up with your airs. But if you work hard, if you keep your head down and your mouth shut, she will help you." Vivian looked at the door. She looked at me. She looked at the crumpled $5 bill in her hand. For a moment I thought she was going to throw it at me. I thought she was going to scream and curse and refuse to leave. But she didn't. She couldn't afford to. That $5 was literally the only thing standing between her and sleeping on a park bench. She smoothed out the bill with trembling fingers. She put the card in her pocket. She picked up her plastic bag from the floor. She walked toward the door. She moved slowly, her limp pronounced, her shoulders hunched. She looked like a ghost of the woman who used to stride through these halls, terrorizing the staff. She stopped at the threshold. She didn't turn around. "Goodbye, Isaiah," she whispered. "Goodbye, Vivian," I said. She walked out. Sarah followed her, keeping a respectful distance but ensuring she didn't stop. I watched until they turned the corner toward the elevators. I stood there for a long moment looking at the empty doorway. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't triumph, it wasn't joy. It was a deep, quiet settling. The final stone had been placed in the wall I had built to protect my peace. I closed the door. I walked back to my desk. I sat down in the leather chair that fit me perfectly. I looked out the window at the city skyline, at the buildings reaching up toward the sky. I picked up a pen. I had a budget to approve. I had a scholarship fund to finalize. I had a meeting with the new chief of surgery in 20 minutes. I was Isaiah Freeman. I was the chairman. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for permission to exist. I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The flash of the cameras was different this time. It wasn't the frantic, hungry popping of paparazzi looking for a scandal. It was the soft, respectful rhythm of history being documented. I stood at the podium in the hospital's new auditorium, the one we had built where the old, crumbling administrative wing used to be. The air didn't smell of fear or stale ambition anymore. It smelled of fresh paint and possibilities. I looked out at the audience. It was a sea of young, eager faces, medical students, nursing students, kids from the South Side, kids from the projects, kids who had the brains and the heart to be healers, but lacked the one thing the world demanded of them: money. I adjusted the microphone. My hand, once calloused and stained with grease, now rested comfortably on the polished wood. I was 75 years old today. Most men my age were slowing down, fading into the background of their own lives, but I was just getting started. "Welcome," I said, my voice filling the room without effort, "to the inaugural ceremony of the Isaiah Freeman Opportunity Fund." Applause washed over me. It was warm. It was genuine. In the front row, Elena sat wiping a tear from her eye. She wasn't the billionaire owner today. She was just Ellie, the girl who had needed a sandwich and a kind word. I didn't build this fund to create a legacy for myself. I continued when the applause died down. I built it because 30 years ago I met a brilliant young woman who was almost crushed by a system that valued shoes over souls. I built it because I know what it is like to have a dream that is heavier than your wallet. I looked at the 5 young men and women sitting behind me on the stage. The first recipients, they were nervous, they were fidgeting in their new clothes. I saw myself in them, I saw Elena in them. "We are not just giving you tuition," I told them, turning to face them. "We are giving you a promise. We promise that as long as you are willing to do the work, as long as you are willing to treat every patient with the dignity they deserve, whether they are a mayor or a janitor, we will have your back. You will never have to choose between lunch and a textbook. You will never have to sleep in your car. You will never be invisible." One of the students, a young man named David, whose father was a mechanic, looked up at me. His eyes were wide with a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. I knew that look. It was the look of someone realizing that the weight of the world had just been lifted off their shoulders. When the ceremony ended, I didn't rush to a VIP room. I stayed. I shook every hand. I listened to every story. I heard about sick mothers and multiple jobs and the long bus rides in the rain. I saw the hunger in their eyes, not for power, but for a chance. Elena came up to me as the last student left. She linked her arm through mine. "You did good, Zeke," she said softly. "We did good, Ellie," I corrected her. She smiled. "You know, Vivian used to use this room for board meetings. She would lock the doors and scream at the department heads until they cried." I looked around the bright open space. "The ghosts are gone," I said. We opened the windows. We walked out of the auditorium and through the halls of the hospital. It was a different place now. The staff smiled when they saw me, not because they were afraid of me, but because they knew I knew their names. They knew I ate in the cafeteria with them. They knew that when the HVAC system broke down in the pediatric ward last month, I was the one down in the mechanical room at 200 a.m. with the maintenance crew, handing them wrenches and coffee, making sure the heat came back on. I wasn't just a signature on a check. I was present. We took the elevator to the top floor, my office. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows. The sun was setting over Chicago, painting the skyline in hues of gold and violet. The city stretched out before me, a vast, breathing grid of lights and lives. I stood there watching the cars move like blood cells through the arteries of the streets. I thought about the man I used to be, the man who walked with his head down, the man who apologized for taking up space. I thought about the basement. It felt like a lifetime ago, a bad dream I had finally woken up from. Elena stood beside me, silent and companionable. She didn't need to fill the air with chatter. We understood each other in the quiet spaces. "Are you happy, Zeke?" she asked after a long while. I thought about the question. Happiness was a fleeting thing. It came and went like the weather. I am at peace, I said, and I think that is worth more. I thought about Marcus. I had heard he was working at a car wash now. I heard he was learning what it meant to work with his hands. Maybe, just maybe, the hardship would make him into a man. Or maybe it wouldn't. But that wasn't my burden to carry anymore. I had given him life. I couldn't live it for him. I thought about Vivian. I wondered if she had caught the bus today. I wondered if she was learning to respect the broom. I hoped she was. Not for her sake, but for the sake of the soul she had almost lost completely. I looked at my reflection in the glass. The Italian suit was impeccable, but it wasn't what made me stand tall. It was the knowledge that I had walked through the fire and come out unburnt. "You know, Ellie," I said, watching the first stars appear above the skyscrapers. "For 40 years I thought I was waiting. I thought I was waiting for Vivian to love me. I thought I was waiting for Marcus to respect me. I thought I was waiting for the world to give me permission to be someone." I turned to her. But I wasn't waiting. I was preparing. I was learning patience. I was learning humility. I was learning how to spot the difference between gold and glitter. Elena squeezed my hand. "And now you are the gold standard," she said. I looked back out at the city. I wasn't lonely. I had Elena. I had the students. I had the staff. I had the memory of my parents, who would have been so proud to see their name on a scholarship fund. And most importantly, I had myself. I had reclaimed the pieces of Isaiah Freeman that I had allowed to be stolen, and I had put them back together into something stronger than before. "I am free, Ellie," I whispered. She nodded. "Yes, Mr. Chairman. You are free." I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the cool air of the penthouse. I wasn't just looking down at the city. I was looking forward. I had work to do. There were systems to fix. There were people to help. There was a life to be lived fully and without apology. The janitor had left the building. The chairman had arrived. And he wasn't going anywhere. We often mistake silence for weakness and patience for stupidity. Isaiah's life teaches us that true dignity isn't found in titles, designer suits, or the validation of others. It is forged in the quiet integrity of one's character. When you devalue the people who sacrifice to build your pedestal, do not be surprised when the foundation crumbles. The world may judge you by what you have, but karma judges you by how you treat those who have nothing. In the end, the only currency that holds its value across a lifetime is how you made others feel when you held the power. We often mistake silence for weakness and patience for stupidity. Isaiah's life teaches us that true dignity isn't found in titles, designer suits, or the validation of others. It is forged in the quiet integrity of one's character. When you devalue the people who sacrificed to build your pedestal, do not be surprised when the foundation crumbles. The world may judge you by what you have, but karma judges you by how you treat those who have nothing. In the end, the only currency that holds its value across a lifetime is how you made others feel when you held the power. If you enjoyed Isaiah's journey from the basement to the boardroom, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice. And tell me in the comments, would you have given Vivian that $5 or would you have walked away without a word? I read every comment.